to run cam. Obviously, these are probably early samples. Certainly, some of the kinks needs to still be worked out, but this is par for the course for run cam. I want to review the original Thumb, which is the 1080p camera, then the Thumb Pro and the Thumb Pro W. The version 1.0 that I received all had issues, so not surprised at all. Okay, so here are the specs. This one here has the IMX586 sensor, and they're saying it's 4800 megapixels. That I think they meant to say 48 megapixels because I've never seen anything 4800. It's too big. And then these are all the different resolutions. Of course, the 4K 60 is the big one, and this 2.7K 60. And then here are the dimensions, in case you're wondering. Here this says it's 24 grams, but obviously, as I showed you, it's 27.5 grams. And just for comparison to the previous version, the Rokin Thumb Pro, that one had a 12 megapixel sensor, the IMX577, and it has the two lenses, 145 and 155, and that one weighed 16 grams, so it was also a bit smaller as well. So camera increased in size, increased in weight, but you get the 60 frames per second, which is the biggest thing about this camera. All right, I want to show you the app. It works just like before. You can set up your QR codes. So you see the Thumb Pro here and the Rokin Thumb 2 new camera. Go in here and then hit your QR code configuration. Got your different settings here. I believe these are, I'm not 100% sure these are stock. I think, yeah, high video quality is or video quality at high is 100 megabits per second. So the bit rate is the highest out of all the Thumb series from RunCam. I think the previous version,
guys, in this video we have got this tiny little Just Air 1/100th scale micro FPV car, and it comes with goggles. Discover your world. So this is from Diatone. I reviewed this little 1/76 scale karting FPV car from Diatone. Really impressed with the controller, the proportional control.
Hello， 我是阿北，欢迎回到我的频道。阿北之前买了一台 3D 印表机，现在在使用中，棒棒的。不过啊，3D 印表机有几个问题点了，然后想要克服一下。那上一个影片大家应该已经看到阿北把这个 ANS Lite 啊放在龙门架上了。为什么会这么做呢？因为比较省空间嘛。对，那接下来还有一个问题就是，3D 印表机的耗材啊，其实还蛮注重环境的关系啦，因为它的湿度不能太多。那有的人说你要印的时候，最好先把线轴烘干，但是阿北没有买那种可以烘干的机器，所以我们只能印它的材料，然后把它封箱起来。我在社群上呢也有找到一个 ANS Lite 封箱的3D 模组，那我们今天就把它印出来，并且把它好好的保护起来吧。Go go！ 好，阿北已经印完了，对，那我们猜印了多久？印了2天左右啊。这些耗材真的还蛮多的。印的文件上面，他会跟你说要印几个，那连结的话会放在影片下方。有兴趣的话啦，可以去看一下它里面的内容。当然呢，不是只有这一套，其实还有很多套，然后都在社群里面等着大家去发现。因为我中间还看了蛮多套的，那我就想说，我们先用这个看一看印出来的效果怎么样。然后这边就是它的相关零件了。那这边呢，这个东西有4个，它有分左右2边，那就是把左右2边的 ANS Lite 盖住。然后这个呢，就是它的那个盘扣啦，就这样。实际上它会是这样盖住一个长盒。然后接下来就是一些小零件的部分了。阿北是有印温湿度计的，那
This toy Mario Kart threw a brushless system in it and well, went for a drive. So I thought it's finally time to do another one. This one is it Mario Kart 8, 7, 200 kb. Or at least get it fast, to adapt it so it pushes through. And then glue in that because of getting the battery and everything in there, it just wouldn't fit. But because he's loose in there anyway, when he's driving, he's going to move about.
Previously, we built this little quadcopter that can fly for over 20 minutes on a single 18650 battery, and it retains a ton of power and flies amazing. but it had one big problem. The analog camera. Analog cameras are great because they're cheap, but they just don't have super good quality. You get a lot of interference, and on these little ones, the VTXs just don't give you enough power to get really long range. There were a ton of you down in the comments asking for a digital version of this quadcopter, and it totally makes sense because it would fix the camera problem with analog, and many digital systems can get a lot of range. I decided to post a poll on my YouTube page, and this is the results. DJI O4 Lite won by a landslide. So that's what we're gonna do. Now, how will this quad perform? On one hand, DJI O4 Lite claims to have up to 10 kilometers of range and is known to have outstanding video clarity. However, it's a little bit heavier and the VTX is power hungry. Will that negate the extra battery life? Today, I'll show you the full build process and we're gonna give it a thorough testing. Let's start with the first major hurdle, sourcing the DJI gear. I'm located in the US, so this stuff is a little bit like contraband. When I saw you guys wanted a DJI build, I was a little worried if I'd even be able to get the parts. But after a little bit of research, I found that the DJI O4 Lite, the actual air unit, was surprisingly easy to order. I simply ordered it from getfpv.com. They had a ton of stock, and I'm not really worried about the future because Flywoo is basically rebranding these things to get them into the US. But again, I needed to snag some goggles, and I decided to go with the Goggles N3 just because they were a really good budget option for $230. These goggles were much harder to find than the air unit. I found that there were a few suppliers who had them in stock, but they were upselling them for almost double the original price. But with a stroke of luck, I ended up getting a kit with the DJI Neo that came with the goggles, and it was on sale for $420 on Amazon. Then I sold the Neo for $240 on Facebook Marketplace the next day. So I only ended up paying $180 total for these goggles, which is a total steal. If you're in the US, your safest option may be to find a US seller on eBay or buy used locally. However, I did see some online retailers selling them for around $250 to $300. Whatever you do, make sure you do your research and find a seller that's legit. Jumping straight into the components, this is a Crux 3-inch frame. It's cheap, light, fairly durable, costs about $6, and weighs around 5 grams. I'll be using these HDLRC Spectre 1202.5 11,000 kV motors. After a bunch of testing, these seem to be the sweet spot to carry an 18650. Any motors of the same size and similar kV should work just fine. I found that Jumpfan Hurricane 30 18 bi-blade props work great. They're a good price, have a good balance of efficiency, power, and performance, and are pretty durable as well. I'll be using this Beta FPV Matrix 3-in-1 flight controller. It weighs about 4 grams and will pair perfectly with a digital system. The ESCs are rated for 12 amps, which should be plenty. It comes with some mounting hardware. We're only going to use the grommets in there, and then this 6-pin connector to connect to your digital system. Here's the DJI O4 air unit. Let's open it up. People claim this is the best digital FPV system on the market with a listed weight of around 9 grams. The air unit with the flight controller weighs collectively 13 grams, while my analog setup weighed about 6 grams. It comes with some bolts, rubber spacers, and this mounting piece here. Depending on which canopy you use, you may or may not need it. I found this 3D printable canopy that I'll link below. It's lightweight, seems pretty durable. I also like how it's slightly raised, and I hope it'll keep the props out of view. For the 18650, the most important thing is to get one that has at least a 20 amp discharge rate. This is a Molly cell here, has a 35 amp discharge rate. This is called an Amprius, has a 10 amp discharge rate, so this one's going to perform a lot better. Rule of thumb, try to get at least 20 amp or higher discharge rate. The higher the better. I would recommend getting something like a Molly cell P28, P30, Amppace JP30, or even Sony BTC5D. Stay away from anything on AliExpress or anything with outrageous claims. They're fakes and will not perform well. A direct connection to the cell is key for high power output. I would urge you to spot weld instead of soldering and to use pure nickel or copper strips. I will be making a tutorial video in the future on how to build one of these 1S batteries with a spot welder, so hold tight for that. Here's a quick update on the batteries that I've been making. Some of you have been asking about it. Is that I have finished some and I'm really proud of how they turned out. The quality is great, they work awesome, but it's just not worth it to make these, and definitely in small quantities. So once these are gone, they're gone. They'll be on my eBay store for a short amount of time. You can buy them if you want. I'll also be selling the Molicel P28B cells at a good price on the eBay store if you're interested in making your own battery. And like I said, a tutorial video will be coming soon. I've also designed 3D printable 18650 battery holders that fit these pre-made batteries perfectly, and they have nice protective ends that help them from getting banged up. I recently added a platform on the bottom so that the quad stands nicely. The files will be publicly available, but if you don't have a 3D printer, I will be including a pair with each set of batteries bought. To charge these batteries, I like to use my Hicito HP6 on the 1S setting at 3 amps to get a full charge in about an hour. Or, if I want to charge multiple batteries, I'll use the Firefly Whoopster 3, and then you need an XT32 PH 2.0 pigtail. You can charge 6 at once at 1.3 amps. The Firefly does have a high voltage 4.35 volts mode. Just make sure you're on the 4.2 volts mode, or you could damage the batteries. Lastly, for the radio, I always recommend the Radio Master Pocket, which is affordable and feature-rich. If you're on a tight budget though, Radio Master also just came out with the T8L. That is about half the price. I haven't tried it yet, but I've heard pretty good things. I always like to check to make sure that your flight controller actually works before you start working on your build. That way you can warranty stuff if you need to. Use the adapter that came with the flight controller to plug it into your computer, and Betaflight Configurator now has an online version, so you don't have to download anything. You'll plug it in, see that it recognizes the flight controller, and then move it around to make sure the gyro works. Next, I needed to update my goggles in order for them to connect to the air unit. You simply plug into the USB-C and then plug into your phone, go to the DJI Fly app, and update it. My goggles weren't automatically on the air unit mode, so I had to switch to that. There's a toggle button and then a back button on top of the goggles. You'll push that toggle button to the right, then click the same button down to click status. Now click over to the right and hit select on switch. Here you have all your options. Scroll down and select the air unit. The air unit will need to be unlocked before you can use it, so plug it into your flight controller and then plug it into a battery. Then find the USB-C port on the air unit, plug it in, and plug the other end into your computer. Make sure to download the DJI Assistant 2 for consumer drones. There's other versions, it won't connect unless you use this one. Once it connects, it gives you the options to unlock the air unit, and you can update it. I've done both those things on mine already. Again, you'll need a battery plugged into the flight controller to bind your unit to the goggles. The LED light should be red. There will also be a little button next to it. Simply hold it down until it starts blinking. With the goggles on, hold the button down until it starts beeping. It will automatically connect and the LEDs will turn solid green. And bing bada boom, you have HD video going straight to your goggles. It turns out this canopy that I printed has the wrong dimensions and it doesn't have an antenna holder either. I decided just to design my own. It's basically an air canopy out of TPU. The files will be public if you want to print it. I'll also put this up on my store because I know everyone doesn't have a 3D printer. I'll make it nice and cheap just in case you want it. This is all the hardware you'll need. I have 4 M2 16mm bolts paired with 4 M2 nylon nuts. I would highly recommend just using the motor plugs. It'll make it so much easier. My motors don't have plugs on them because I took them off for my last build. So I will be removing this and I'm going to show you how, just in case you want to. You will get a little higher performance with a direct connection, but I think in this case the ease of just leaving them on would be more worth it, in my opinion. So I simply get some kind of tweezers, rock back and forth, Be careful not to push too hard, and they just slide off like that, and then you can just take these guys, bend them down, and they'll break right off. We'll solder onto there. Oh yeah, no, these pads are a lot bigger than the Matrix 5-in-1. So that's going to be easier than the Matrix at least. I say this every time, but seriously, get yourself a decent soldering iron. I started with an AliExpress $5 iron. I was not able to solder anything. You don't have to get this one. I just know this works great. It's off Amazon. It's a good price. That's all I'm going to say. After quite some time of me being stupid and just breathing in the deadly toxic fumes from soldering, I finally decided to get a fume extractor. This was actually one of the cheaper ones on Amazon, and it works super well. Let me show you. It comes with these magnetic sidewalls to help extract the fumes better, but it's strong enough I found I don't even need them. First, let me show you without it. Just straight up, turn it on. Don't like to waste, but man, is that cool. Now don't forget to use flux, it makes the job so much easier. After that, heat your soldering iron up and just add little globs to it. Waste, but man, is that cool. Now don't forget to use flux, it makes the job so much easier. After that, heat your soldering iron up and just add little globs to it and push it up against the pads. The flux makes it so the solder just flows on. Some tweezers to hold the wire, press your soldering iron on top, and it melds right together. Now for piecing all the parts together, I like to start with the battery holder. You'll put a bolt in through the bottom, just like I'm doing here, and then screw it straight into the canopy. The flight controller will go on the bottom with the DJI Air unit on top. Then I did the sides, I just lined everything up, put the longer 2mm bolts through, and screwed it on. And don't be like me, I forgot to do the VTX antenna. I would do that before you screw it on. You can see here that I was struggling a little bit, but I did end up getting it. I was just too stubborn to undo the bolts. Now there's just enough bolt hanging on top to thread a little nut, so that's where I use the nylon nuts, and it just locks everything into place. Now you can see that I forgot to switch the connector, so I ended up taking that off, stripping the wires, tinning them, and then adding the XT30 connector. I opted for 4mm motor mount bolts instead of the 5mm ones that came with it. It just fit a little better. I would always recommend using a smoke stopper. It's like a $5 investment. You simply plug in your battery, it'll show a green light, you plug it into your quadcopter. If it turns red, you did something wrong and it won't fry the board, but mine was green, so we're good. I love how the battery just press fits into place really easily, and it's also a really solid fit. I also widened the landing gear to make it more stable. For the weigh-in, it ended up weighing around 48 grams, and then with the battery, just shy of 100, while the analog build was like 91, 92 grams. For anyone who wants to see the Betaflight configuration, that'll be at the end. But I just wanted to show you before I did the test flight how easy everything fits into this tiny little backpack. It's pretty awesome. That's what I love about these little quads. I even have enough room to bring a battery to use for the charger to charge the extra batteries. Right off the bat, I am super impressed with the image quality. Little full throttle here wasn't half bad either. But there was one thing I just couldn't stop focusing on, and that was the vibrations and the wicked DJI Jello. I tried messing with some of the video settings. DJI has what's called rock steady mode, which self-stabilizes as you go. That was automatically on. I turned it off and it got worse. But I still wasn't happy with this, and I know DJI is known to have this problem, and that it's mostly in the canopy. So let's bring it in and try to fix it. Right away, I noticed that the canopy could move back and forth pretty easy, and the wind was probably causing some of those vibrations. And then if you look closely on the left side of the screen, there's something under the arm kind of holding it in place, but on the right side, there's nothing allowing it to move a lot more. I simply just stuck a little bit of foam on that right side to give it a little more support. It definitely seemed more sturdy, so I'm hoping it'll work. I'll make some tweaks to the actual design later. I also found my battery holders had a serious weak point and they started to break off. I'll show you right here. I went back into Onshape and used the fillet tool to give it some more support. A quick test showed that it was much stronger, and I actually had a pretty hard time breaking it. I was pretty happy with that. My last problem is overcoming voltage sag. These lithium-ion builds can run for a long time, partially because you can run them down to really low voltages. The problem with that is the lower the voltage, the lower your power as well. One of you guys mentioned in my last video to try turning on voltage sag compensation. Basically, this just means that your throttle becomes more sensitive as your battery voltage goes down, and that compensates for your battery going down, meaning the power should feel very similar throughout the whole battery. Okay, finally, to some actual flight review. There are definitely some improvements here to those vibrations. It's not perfect, but a lot better. Now, how does this digital version compare to the analog version I made previously? Not surprisingly, the analog version was a little bit lighter, and you can just barely tell there's more responsiveness and just a little bit more power. Interestingly, that version had 5 amp ESCs that were rated up to 8 amps for 3-second bursts. This HD build, however, has 12 amp ESCs, so you would figure they'd be able to draw more amps. But the most it read was only 15. To me, this simply means one of two things. The first option being the HD flight controller is limiting the amps, causing it to draw less amperage. But since they both seem to have similar amounts of power, I just think the amp meters aren't reading super accurate, and that's why they don't line up. The last big problem with this digital build is price, and you simply can't get away from that. You're getting better quality, but it does basically double the price of the quadcopter. The last quad cost me around $120 to build, and this video system in itself costs $120. It's not surprising that the image quality is crystal clear and the range is great. I'm not going to do a long range test on this bad boy until I can get a GPS on it, because I do not want to lose it. However, I can say I was doing like 500-meter orbits around myself with no problem to the video signal. The radio signal, on the other hand, was struggling a little bit, so that is the weak link currently. I'd say it has about as much freestyle capability as the analog version, meaning it can do light freestyle pretty decently. However, where it really excels is being able to cruise around and explore. I felt like an eagle in the sky, actually being able to see all the little details. I was able to avoid branches so much better, be a little more confident, and go in areas I just wouldn't dare with analog. Now, the absolute best thing about this quad is you don't need an action cam. The analog version really can't handle an action cam, or it could, but it would make it pretty sluggish. This, on the other hand, it's 2-in-1. You're basically getting the footage of an action cam, and you actually get to see through that lens. Now, I think a lot of you, and myself, were really curious if this quad would actually be able to have good flight time with the power-hungry VTX and heavier weight. I was super surprised. It got a whopping 22-minute flight time, and that was with pretty cold 45-degree weather, and the VTX was set to max at 700 milliwatts. I would not be surprised at all if this build could go over 25 minutes in warmer weather. While pushing it pretty hard in this colder weather, I got about 13 minutes flight time, so I think it's pretty safe to say you'll get in between 10 and 25 minutes of flight time, depending on how you're flying. And I almost forgot about the feedback compensation. I would definitely recommend it. I was getting way more consistent power throughout the battery. It won't help with the top end power, but it feels more consistent. My final verdict on the build is that this HD digital system really complements all the strengths of this quadcopter. The ultra long flight time actually lets you use the full range of the digital system, and with a lot of quadcopters, you just don't make use of it. However, it is about twice as expensive, so the budget option is always going to be analog, and it has less latency. Freestyle is a little better, just a little bit more performance. I would love to be making more content and to do it full time, so I started a Patreon, and if you're interested, you could join, and that would really help out. For Betaflight configuration, make sure you found your quad to your radio, plug a fully charged battery into the quad, make sure your radio is connected, have a fan to keep everything cool, and then I like to have my goggles for when I'm adjusting my OSD. To get started, place your quad on a flat surface and then hit the calibrate button. Now they've already configured everything in the ports tab, but I'm just double checking and it looks good. On configuration, we're just looking for a couple things. Max arm angle should be set to 180 so you can arm at any angle. and then make sure RX set is set to on so that you'll have a beeper, which they've already done, and you can name your quad.
오늘 먹잖아? 이거 저 먹은 사람들 진짜 미친 사람들이야. 那个是地狱辣的，那个之后我有看了那个影片的留言，但是有些人说颜色好像是不对的，好像我没有点错这样子的留言，那时候觉得有点委屈，因为我们吃的是真的是很辣的，而且是因为就是还去了医院，然后那个之后我也是上网查一下，就是我吃的是不是地狱辣，应该是中辣。没错，颜色也是完全不一样，跟那个留言说的一样，就是颜色真的果然是不一样。所以今天也是要去挑战那个地狱辣，但是我觉得我需要我的保护者。如果要做很比较危险的东西，需要保护者嘛。比如说你要去看18岁的那种比较那种影片的话，也需要爸爸妈妈嘛，不能一个人自己看嘛。对，这次也是我去吃很非常非常辣的东西，我需要我的保护者。所以我吃地狱辣之前需要热身，所以我来找在台北很辣的当兵，我的保护者。맞죠?
뭘 먹을 거야?
爸爸还不知道我们今天要吃什么，真的不知道。오늘 엄청 매운 걸 먹을 건데 그렇게 진짜 매워서 아빠는 못 먹어.
매운 맛을 좋아하지.
아니. 아빠가 먹으면 욕 먹어 내가.
그래.
사람을 괴롭힌다고 욕 먹는다.
그래.
불륜이라고 욕 먹어.
그래서 어쩌라고.
그래서 아빠는 못 먹고 그냥 아빠는 내 옆에서 보호 잡을 수 있어줘. 응.
그래.
몸을 좀 풀어야잖아. 딸기를 먹으러 갈 거야. 근데 여기도 뒤로 소문이 났어.
그래.
응. 근데 매운 거 시키니까 우유 필요해서.
우리가 안 좋을 텐데. 물이 날 텐데.
아니 나도 살아야 조금.
그 물이 날 텐데. 이건 안 나?
내가 여기는 안 먹어. 그래서 얼마나 매운지 모르겠어.
그러면 지도하지 말라는 거 보니까 그거 주는 건지 모르겠지만 너 내용이 그렇네. 매운 게 자신 있어도 가볍게 생각하지 마라.
그렇지. 아빠는 안 먹이잖아.
그래, 뭐 나는 먹고 싶어.
내가 솔직히 난 유튜버로서 아빠를 먹이고 싶어.
아, 나는 먹고 싶어.
안 돼 아빠. 60대 아저씨
아이씨.
이렇게 장난치면 안 된다. 아빠 이제 60 넘은 지 얼마 안 됐잖아. 오래 살아야지.
먹고 죽는 걸 팔겠어.
아니 아빠 진짜 실력한다. 응급실 실력한 사람 있다니까. 아 은혜 아빠 응급실 갔다니까 은혜.
그러니까 여기 오면 내용이 그렇네. 근데 많이 안 먹으면 돼. 조금 안 먹어.
한국인들이 이렇게 기본적으로 생각을 합니다. 다들 매운 거에 대한 자부심이 있어서
그렇지.
뭐 매워봤자 뭐 응급실에 실려가겠어. 뭐 이렇게 한다고. 이따 보자 아빠 먹고 나서. 아니 근데 조금이라도 맺었으면 억지로 먹지 마 아빠. 진짜 아빠는 욕심내야 돼.
매우면 좀 자신이 있지. 그냥
이렇다니까 한국인들 위험해. 뭐야? 진짜네. 아 진짜네.
와.
이게 방금 와 매운 냄새가
나네.
여기까지 올라오네.
아, 이게 기침을 하도록 돼 있네.
와. 약간 지나가는 사람들 지금
그렇지.
깜짝 놀라더라. 와.
야, 오늘 이게 제일 매운 거 하는 모양이다. 지금 냄새가 없는
우리 거야. 우리 키운 거야. 자, 빨리 워밍업이야, 워밍업. 자, 생긴 건 진짜 맛있어 보인다, 아빠.
그 맛있게 보네. 매운 그게 아까는 매운 게 강하더만 지금은 그게 없네. 맛이 사라졌네.
너무 맵지? 지금 아빠 떨어뜨렸다. 매워. 기다려봐. 나 조금 먹었거든, 아빠.
조금씩 먹어야 돼. 아, 아빠 나 많이 먹었어.
아, 사장님 놀랄만 하다, 지금. 왜 고추가 있네, 또.
매운
이거는,
맛이 있네. 맥주만 맛있다.
근데 지난번에 먹었던 것보다는 조금 덜 매워, 내가 봤을 때. 지금까지는.
이게 많이 먹으면 안 돼. 또 장난 아니다. 근데 매운데 매운맛이 있네. 맵지만 맛이 있네. 매운맛 알지? 맛이야 맛이 느껴지네.
아. 아 이거는 진짜 맵다 아빠.
맛있지?
아빠 생각보다 잘 먹네. 와 이거 점점 매워지네.
콧물이 나서 하지. 근데 맛이 매운맛이 좋은 매운맛이야. 좋은 매운맛.
아니 아빠 진짜 잘 먹네. 이거 점점 매워지는데?
아, 하나. 많이 먹으면 병원을 줄여봐. 너무 매우니까 빨리 넘겨버리잖아. 그래서 병원을 쉽게 줄여가는 것 같아.
아 꼭꼭 씹고 있다 아빠. 봐봐 이거 지금 콧물 나고 있잖아. 나 원래 먹을 때 콧물 잘 안 나는데. 아빠 진짜 잘 먹네? 이거 진짜 안 매워 보이네?
아니 다른 분들은 내가 해보니까 안 매운 것 같지만
진짜 안 매워 보이잖아. 근데 진짜 매워.
이 아는 사람은 알까 매운 거.
아마 화면 상태 안 할걸?
아빠는 이 정도면 참아야지. 아빠 군대 갔다 왔잖아.
아 군대랑 무슨 상관이야.
야 이 사람아
아빠
아무리
진짜 너무 매운데?
맵고 뭐 그래도 좀 견딜만한데 군대 가면 가스 들어간다고 저거는 좀 들어간 것 같아.
아니 가스만 들어가는 거야. 아빠 진짜 괜찮아?
콧물만 혹시 많이 먹으라 할이 나가 싶어서 못 먹지.
응.
맛은 좋아. 매운 좋은 매운맛이.
아 진짜 맛있거든?
음.
맛있고 이게 억지로 그런 만든 그런 매운맛이 아니야.
맛은
맛있어. 짬미가 진짜 맛있고 나 이런 짬미 처음 먹어 솔직히.
맛있어.
내가 타이페이에서 매운 곳이라 하는 곳을 한 4군데 갔었거든? 솔직히 다 그냥 그랬어. 근데 여기는 진짜 인정. 아 거울 작품을 못된 것 같아. 여기는 귀 아파. 소영이가 귀 아프다는 게 이거였구나. 소영이가 저걸 매운 거 먹고 귀 아프다고 했거든?
그래도 아프네 진짜. 진짜 계속 아프네. 찌한데.
아빠 노래 먹지 마. 그래 아빠 먹지 마.
아니 잠깐 기다려봐.
다친다 아빠. 그래도
어떻게 먹는지 우리 사장님이 보고 있다. 우리 사장님이 보고 있다 우리를. 어떻게 먹는지.
이걸 먹어본 사람은 알 거야. 아빠가 이렇게 아무렇지도 않게 먹는 게 진짜 잘 먹는 거라는 건 알 거야. 사장님이 아까 그랬어. 진짜 니 최딩 그거 네가 시킨 거냐고 괜찮겠냐고. 진짜 2번이나 나와서 그랬어 주방에서.
그래.
우리가 카메라를 못 담았거든. 그때가 나 카메라를 끄고 있어가지고 사장님이 진짜 저한테 2번이나 나왔어. 괜찮겠어? 이거 진짜 매워. 그리고 요리하다가 나가지고 근데 진짜 괜찮겠어? 라고 2번이나 나왔어. 잘 이제 먹는 했으니까 제일 매운 거
아 이게
먹어.
음식이 뭐야? 이런 거 충분하다. 끝내야겠어.
아니다. 아빠
안 된다.
아빠 안 먹어도 돼.
아니 거기 자꾸 먹으려고 그래?
나는 증명해야 돼.
무슨 증명?
왜 내가 매운 걸 시켰다는 거를.
알지. 이거는 이 정도면 충분해.
아니다.
머리야.
나는 오늘 가서 도전할 거고 실패하면 실패하는 거고. 아빠 안 먹어도 돼. 아빠는 옆에서 그냥 그 꼬맹이들 먹는 그런 거고. 내가 지난번에 먹을 때는 머리가 띵한다거나 귀가 아프다거나 그런 느낌이 없었는데 오늘은 진짜 명확해. 지금 머리가 띵해.
요단강에 한 4대 받았다. 머리가 왜 이렇게
소속에는 야채 혐한되고 바로 포기했잖아.
매운 그러면 한국이잖아. 그래서 내가 한번 도전해봤다. 먹을만 하더라. 맛은 있더라.
내가 저번에 이거 시켰었거든.
아니 매운 거야?
근데 메뉴판에는 저 매운맛이 없어. 그냥 그냥 띠미라. 나는 정확하게 얘기해볼게. 그 무슨 동의실 써야 된다 했던 것 같거든? 메뉴표를 읽을 수 있으면 내 공자 역할 정해져 알겠지? 그리고 나도 이거 좀 안 되겠다 싶을 땐 나도 멈출게. 함부로 절대 따라하면 안 돼.
그 정도로 까지 하면서 먹어야 돼?
약속했어.
그랬어.
동의
要是
역시
小的是大碗的，小的是350，大碗的是500。
小的好了。地米辣是吗？地米辣不是。
没错，没错。
OK，不好意思，我改成大碗好了，大碗。 저번에 제일 매운 걸 시켰었는데 작은 그릇을 시켰었거든. 근데 사람들이 그 말 하더라고. 작은 거랑 큰 거랑 맵기가 다르다고. 그래서 그냥 큰 거 시켰어. 많이 못 먹으니까 괜히 먹고 남길까봐 작은 걸 시켰어. 사람들이 이게 작은 게 안 매운 건 줄 알고더라고. 그래서 이번에는 그냥 큰 거를 시켰어. 애초에.
못 먹잖아.
근데 시켜야지. 혹시 오해할까봐. 나 진짜 매운 거 시키는 건데 작은 거를 시켜서 안 매운 거라고 할까봐. 그래서 그냥 애초에 그냥 큰 거 시켰어. 근데 진짜 나 다른 사람 유튜브를 보니까 그게 진짜 빨간색이더라고. 근데 내가 시킨 건 거의 막 흰색이었거든. 그거는 완전 빨간 소스였어. 근데 내 거는 그렇게 빨간 소스는 아니었단 말이야.
아니 그거 먹고 뭐 병원 실내 갔다면서.
2, 3일 뒤에 갔어.
그래.
超级辣的.
对，
아,
没错。
색깔이 다르네. 그때랑 확실히 다르다.
그래.
아직 적응 안 돼. 동의서 붙여야 돼.
아니 이거 주스.
아니. 그때랑 확실히 다르네. 그때는 동의서 같은 거 안 썼었거든. 지난번에는 잘못 나온 게 맞다. 제가 틀렸습니다. 아, 오케이. 갈색.
그때 흰색이었어?
그때는 이렇게까지 빨갛지 않았어.
그런데도 매웠단 말이지.
근데도 맵긴 매웠어. 내가 먹어볼게.
조금씩 먹지. 조금씩.
와,
근데 양이 큰 걸 먹어야 돼 원래? 작은 거.
혹시 오해할까봐 난 작은 거 시키고 싶었어.
고기야 고기. 야 이걸 다 먹으면은 이건 위험하다. 이거는 도전이 아니고 모험이다 모험.
맵다.
그렇죠. 한잔 하라. 내가 도전해야 되는데 잘못하는 거 아니야?
근데 먹으면 안 돼.
맛을 모르겠지? 그냥 모르지. 모르지. 그래서 먹어도 되나?
와.
야 이거 먹으면 진짜 뭐 고추 이런 거는 전면인데 그 모르는데 속이
잠깐만, 말이 안 나온다. 귀가 아파. 나 포기.
그냥 잠깐
야, 나 나한테 말할 기회 줘. Please. Stop. 빵치.
고기
5분 만에 포기했다.
이거 못했어? 나와라.
잠깐만, 안 된다. 이거 동의서 써야 된다. 먹어야 돼, 먹어야 돼. 그래.
关掉了。
안 되려고 해야 돼.
아니 뭐 왜?
안 돼, 먹지 마. 먹지 마. 진짜 큰일 난다. 진짜 큰일 난다.
그냥 막 하고
진짜 큰일 난다. 진짜 쏠린다.
뭐 쓰는데 이 사람은.
아니 절대 먹지 마. 나 진짜 장난 아니다.
그러니까. 그래서 니야 그것도
안 된다고 안 된다고 진짜 먹어. 쓰러져.
아니 하나도 안 먹어보자. 하나도 안 먹어.
내가 괜찮으면 그때 먹어.
역시. 이야. 궁금하네. 궁금하네. 나 냄새 안 맡아보자. 근데 참기름 매운 그게 안 나는데.
나 내 인생에서 이렇게 매운 거 처음 먹어본다. 아 말 시키면 안 돼.
오케이.
이게 말할 때마다 매운 게 올라오거든. 그래서 이걸 계속 넣어줘야 돼. 이거 먹잖아? 이거 저 다 먹은 사람들 진짜 미친 사람들이야. 살인나 지금 연락해보고 싶다. 그 사람이 살아있나? 나 진짜 미칠 것 같아. 절대 먹으면 안 된다. 절대 먹으면 안 된다. 진짜 큰일 난다. 나 진짜 장난이야.
이런 몸은 여기서 끝내라. 이런 거
나 이제
다시 할 거야? 새로 타는 거야?
아니고 나 지금 귀가 목이랑 너무 아파.
아, 이런 거는 좀 자제해야 되는 거 아니야? 이런 거는?
진짜 아빠 먹으면 아빠는 진짜 큰일 난다.
내가 매운 거
내가 매운 걸 진짜 잘 먹는 편이야. 그래도 먹는 편인데 이거는 먹으면
그것만 가능나?
아빠는 바로 끝이다.
119 실려가.
119 실려가는 게 아니고 나 여기 대만에서 날아간다. 아빠가 먹은 거 먹여서 하늘 가게 한 최초의 한국 유튜버로 진짜 신문 나가지고 아빠는 그냥 내 인생도 큰일 나는 거고 아빠도 큰일 나는 거고 우리 가족 다 망하는 거다. 손도 대지 마. 아까 그 첫 번째 거랑 차원이 달라. 절대로 아까처럼 포커스페이스 유지 못한다.
아, 좀 난다.
이거 안 사왔잖아? 나 진짜 큰일 났다.
아, 이 들어가는 거야. 너무 큰일 나다.
와 이거는 미친 거 아닌가? 미친 거야. 이거 어떻게 다 먹어? 이 사람 살아있어? 이거 진짜 연락처 봐서 다 연락해봐야 돼. 이거 주장이 아니고 다 연락해야 돼. 진짜로. 이거 사람을 모시는 게 아니야. 내가 저번에 잘못 시킨 건 진짜 인정하게. 발세. 진짜 발세하게. 난 그게 진짜 제일 매운 단계인 줄 알았어. 왜냐면 그것도 매웠거든. 이거는 진짜 응급실 실려갈 만해. 동의서 받을 만해.
근데 이걸 찾는 사람이 없을 거 아니야? 이거 먹는 사람이 없을 거 아니야?
있잖아.
아니, 있어도 뭐.
내가 지금 찍고 있다. 这个不是，这个是我人生吃过的最辣，韩国也没有这么辣的。哇，你不行，你真的不行，危险哦。哇，你吃过吗？这个人还活着吗？这些人，超级辣的，我怎么可以吃完？我真的不敢相信。哇，他们真的是很厉，都是台湾人吗？
有的那个别的国家，
哇，
有
美国人，
还有
日本人，哦，我输给日本人，马来西亚，哇，真的，이거 진짜 이 사람들 진짜 사람이 아니야. 진짜 나도 어떻게 보면 유튜버잖아. 나도 솔직히 내가 상상한 거는 아까 오기 전에 내 결심을 했어. 아무리 매워도 이걸 멋있게 다 먹고 그만 신문 한 번 더 나자. 내가 대만에서 처음에 유명해졌던 게 이제 비키니 입고 온천 갔던 거잖아. 그때가 내 전성기였어. 난 이거를 먹고 나서 별로 안 매운데? 하고 신문에 나는 거지. 와, 한국인 유튜버가 진짜 이 매운 음식을 먹고 하나도 안 맵다고 했다. 제2의 전성기를 늘 생각을 했어. 난 진짜 그럴 생각이었어. 그리고 진짜 처음부터 다 먹을라 했어. 거짓말 안 치고. 근데 이거는 진짜 사람이 뭘 그게 아니야. 나 이제
정말.
내 생명을 정말 더 사랑하게 됐고 내 지금 있는 이 삶을 즐기기로 했어. 나는 실패해도 좋아. 늘 도전하는 삶을 살 거야. 왜냐면 나는 죽었다 다시 깨어났으니까. 그리고 나는 진짜 경고하고 싶은 거는 이거 보고 진짜 매운 거 못 먹는데 여기 와서 사람들이 도전할까봐 진짜로 경고해야 돼. 매운 거를 조금이라도 못 먹는 사람은 절대 이거 도전하면 안 돼. 이거는 칭칭은 안 돼. 이거 진짜 맛있거든. 뭐 먹고 싶은 사람은 꼭 이 칭칭을 먹어. 이거 진짜 맛있어. 이거는 안 돼. 근데 아까 아이가 가까이 왔었잖아. 나 혹시 애기가 실수로 이거 손으로 만질까봐 무서워서 오지 말라고 했어. 그 정도야 아빠. 만약에 은혜랑 선우가 이거 먹었잖아? 나 진짜 큰일 뻔했다. 나 그때 정말 다행이야. 그때 실수로 잘못 시킨 게. 왜냐면 그거 가지고도 이제 매워하고 힘들어했는데 이거 먹었으면 얘는 진짜 죽었다. 내가 너무 진짜 매운 거 지금 말도 안 나가. 매운 거 잘 먹는 나도 지금 이 정도인데 한 입 먹고 얘네 이거 먹었잖아? 진짜 큰일 났다. 진짜.
매운 거는 우리가 좀 익숙해가지고 나도 웬만하면 먹을 수 있다고 생각하는데
봐봐.
지금 보니까
동나제.
싹 차고
맞지? 나 아까 그 매워 그 죽겠는 그 상황에서 내
Hi everyone, this is Arnold, Whiskers.com, and today I like to talk about these little micro servos. I recently needed one for a project, but it turned out that although I have saved 4 broken servos, all my working servos were in use, for example in this robot cat. It contains no fewer than 12 of those little SG90 servos for the legs, and another one for the head. So yes, there is a total of 13 servos here in use, and I didn't really want to remove them for a small experiment for another project. Of course, I searched around, but all micro servos, such as the MG90 or the SG90, turned out to be in use. What I did have was a bag with 4 servos that I had set aside at some point because they no longer worked. I had already wanted to throw them away, but I kept them anyway, thinking I might try to repair them later. Because, hey, maybe after all it was just a broken wire or a broken part that could be replaced. So I tried these broken dead servos again on my servo tester. But it soon became clear that they hadn't repaired themselves in the meantime. None of the 4 worked. Only one of the larger model servos worked. But none of the micro servos was still functioning. This was a total of 4 SG90 servos that no longer worked and was basically dead. A quick search of YouTube videos on repairing broken servos revealed that disconnection of the wires inside the servo is a common problem. There appear to be countless YouTube videos showing how to resolder the wires and repair your servo that way. But would it be really that simple in my case? I just feared not. I had only opened one of the servos to check this, and the wiring of it seems completely fine. The circuit board simply showed the 5 volts supply voltage, and the yellow signal wire was also undamaged. Yet that servo didn't make a sound and seemed completely dead. Because I really was in need of a micro servo, I decided to make a little more effort this time and take the servo further apart, so I could examine the circuit board. Perhaps the servo could be revived if I could replace a motor driver or a differential amplifier, and maybe it was something as simple as a broken voltage regulator or something similar. In the meantime, I opened 2 of the 4 broken servos. I opened the housing and removed the plastic top and bottom lids. The wiring seemed fine, and I connected the servo to the tester again. At that point, the servo was still not working. Then I removed the gears and pushed out the motor and the circuit board and potentiometer. And then I noticed something very strange when I connected the servo to the tester again. The little motor came back to life and started running again. When I reassembled the servo, without doing any other repair, it came back to life and was fully functional again. All I had done was remove the gears and the link to the potentiometer to apparently break some kind of magical deadlock. The servo was alive again. I repeated that exact same scenario with the second servo, and that one repaired itself magically as well. So that's the reason I've put on my video camera now, and the result will be this video. So now I have 2 more microservos left that are dead, and I haven't checked these yet, so it might still just be a broken wire, but secretly, of course, I hope that these can also be magically reborn with the same procedure. Opening a servo is pretty easy. All you need is a knife and cut the sticker on the side, on both sides, in fact. And then you can remove, of course, the lids on the top and the bottom. Let me give it another small cut, and then I'll probably be able to get the top and bottom lids off so we can look inside. Here it goes. And this will enable me to lift off the bottom lid that comes free from the wire, and the top lid that's has been covering the gearbox. Let's put it aside. And here we have our naked servo without any cover. Well, only the top gear where you attach the servo arm seems to be made of metal. That's where the servo arm goes, but the rest of the gears seems just plastic to me. I think I've bought it as a Metal Gear MG90, so in that respect it's a bit of a rip-off perhaps. But back to the subject, let's check if it still works or if it's still dead. Well, it is still dead. It's not working, everything's connected correctly, but it's not functioning. So the next big question is, does it have any broken wires? Because almost all the repair videos on the internet state that that is always the case. Well, I can measure 5 volts on the PCB over here, so no problem there. Everything's connected just fine and it's not functioning. And because the signal wire seems connected correctly too, it's not going to be the easy fix of just resoldering some wires for me this time. On the PCB board in the servo housing are only a few components, but what stands out in particular are the 2 8-pin SMD chips. Unfortunately, the one on the bottom has no marking. It's probably a differential amplifier for the feedback of the potentiometer position. And there is a chip on the other side. Inside it has the inscription KC8102 2004A. Well, given the pin out, that must be a PWM driver chip for the motor. Unfortunately, I can't find any information about the circuit board online. I searched, but I found nothing. Probably these are all proprietary chips for this PCB and for this servos. But should there be anyone that has some schematics or more information, please leave a comment. It's always nice to have some more information. So let's strip the servo a little bit more because it was not working. We're going to remove the gears and now we have to push it out of the little plastic casing. That takes a bit of fiddling. Yes, I guess it's coming out. And here we have our bare servo. This is actually the functional basis of the servo. Small motor and a potentiometer that provides the feedback. This is the motor. Here we have our potentiometer. And that feedback of that potentiometer is of course processed in, I guess, this little differential amplifier here. And another check for the pulse width modulation translation to, well, motor voltage, I guess, driving the motor. Some other stuff like the transistor is on there, a small capacitor, not too much, but I'm very interested in schematics, so should anybody have these, please leave a comment. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a drum roll because I'm gonna connect this and let's see. I hope you can hear it. It's rotating and it's working. So how come? The only thing I can think of is that the gearbox that we removed is in some way blocked or clogged together, disabling the motor to run. So I have done nothing. I just opened the case and that's it. So let's see what happens if we build it together again. So we click it in. So this is also the proof, of course I have to need the other part. This is also the proof that the wires were perfectly connected and there was no problem with soldering on these or breaking these connections here. So this is totally new concept. Again, I've never seen this on the internet. Everybody who claims to repair these things does only check the wires, and if they're lost and disconnected, they resolder them, and they have a video with 55k views. But this is totally different, and I don't even understand why it works. The only thing I can make up is that it's clogged, that it has a clogged gear or something like that. But let me first reinstall the gearbox. Will I succeed? Yeah, I will succeed, yeah. Okay, so the gearbox is back in place again. Let me add one of these, where is it? One of these little things so that you can clearly see what's going on. Let's reconnect the thing. Now, how about that? It is working again. I'm not totally sure what's going on here. So if anybody knows, by just opening a microservo like this and have it again come to life, please let me know. So before I build this together, let me try the last of the 4 servos that was not working, and let's first see if it is not working still. So that goes. Oh, that's weird. Oh no, it's okay. So I'll reconnect this, doing the wire, the screws in a moment. So we have, for this video, we have only one left. We have only one broken servo left. And I'll prove this to you. Well, I don't even have to put this on. And you can clearly see that does not work. Ah, that's interesting. Here is one of the normal candidates. Oh, that's a good thing for this video. Look at it. This is a normal patient. It has its wires disconnected. So the final test, that is soldered, and let's see if the, yeah, it is. I hope you can hear it is running again. So if we build this one together, it will be working as well. So I'm very curious now if it works again after soldering the wires. This servo also had the gearbox been removed and put back by me, and the good thing it is working. There is something I noticed, however, and perhaps that could explain why I got the other three working. When you do a close look, when you have a close look at the gearbox, you see that the last gear has a knob, has a small protruding knock over there, and that will of course be able to run into the other gear here. So it could not be assembled in any way you like. So I might have been lucky with the other three, with these other three that I just opened, removed the gearbox and put it back and got it working again. By having the knock over here. And perhaps that is an explanation. Should an SG, an MG or an SG, a 90 servo be able to get into some kind of situation or state in which the knob over here is clutched against this other gear, but it is thinking it has to move that way and it's running itself into a corner, and that could explain the heat of the motor. But I have no clue how a servo that I've not opened before and that was just working pretty fine could come into a situation in which this little knob, runs into the other gear and prevents it from working. So it seems that. And when you remove it and you put it back, of course you have to put it back like this. This is the neutral way. So it can go either way now for about, 60 degrees, I guess. Yeah, that could be a reason. That could be a solution why by just removing the gearbox, put it back. But I'm not completely convinced. So if you have any clues how I got these three other servos back to life by just opening it, removing the gearbox, and that's it. But this bothers me, and I'm very curious what happens here. So as anybody knows why I got these three servos alive again by just opening them, well, disassembling them, disassembling the gearbox and put it all together, please let me know. Please let me know. And I hope that you don't throw away your dead servos like that. And first, open them. And hopefully, it's as easy as a disconnected wire. But this is even more work to restore than to just opening it and closing it. So, if anybody knows, I hope you can do your can breathe new life into your servos with this little trick. And I hope you enjoyed the video. See you again next time. Until then, happy hacking!
Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the NewBie-Drone mosquito frame. But right down here, the carbon fiber, that's what we're talking about. 3D print does not come with the frame. It is made by Digit on Thingiverse. You could really build it with any sort of loop parts that you care to. You could make it 2S if you want to. Mine set up for 1S. Or you could take your Mobile 6 or Mobile 7 or other sorts of loops and transfer it to a non-prop guarded frame like this. In my case, I have the 0802 19,000 kV motors on 40mm Aziz props from NewbieDrone. Runcam Nano 3 with the V2 lens. The all-in-one board down there is the Happy Model Crazy Bee F4 Lite, which has the VTX, the receiver, the ESC, and the flight controller. It's really an all-in-one. Mine weighs just a touch over 24 grams. I flew it exclusively on these NewbieDrone Nitro Nectar batteries, and these are important for your performance and flight time. No other batteries perform like them. And with that battery, it brings the weight up to 32 1/4 grams. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting about 80mm. Carbon fiber is 2.5mm thick. The arm width is 5mm. We have cutouts down here in the frame for the motor plug and the USB port. Also nice big holes to make sure your C-clip on the bottom of your motor belt do rotate freely. We got one of those nice calm days here, and I did make some changes. I am running BlueJ on the ESC firmware, and I'm running EmuFlight on the flight controller. BlueJ has the frequency set for 48 kilohertz, so those things are going to play a role. This has been a long time coming. I've mentioned it in a few videos that I was tinkering with it and making some changes. I don't think I have my tune locked in, as we like to say sometimes. I just think my tune is okay. It's pretty good. It's definitely flyable. With little things like this, I like them because you can just go out and just fly them around. Any space is going to be flyable. You can have micro fun, FPV fun. Don't have to be too concerned about anything. It shouldn't bother anyone. If anyone's annoyed by it, show it to them, and they'll probably laugh at you and go away. At least that's my take on it. But when I tend to fly these super light, super small, non-prop guarded quads outside, I find that I tend to explore more as far as doing different things, maybe getting myself into trouble, because I can bail out easier. There's less inertia, there's less likely to have big crashes, so it kind of gives you a freer experience. I will say that if you're someone who bashes, like I just did, you probably want to go with 1102 motors and a 1.5mm shaft. That will mean you can't run these props though. The 1mm shafts, they tend to break, and so if you tend to crash a lot or you're a basher, as I said, 1mm shafts aren't going to last very long. If you're using 1mm shafts and some super stiff props like the gem fans, it's probably going to last even a shorter period of time. So 1102 1.5mm shafts is probably a pretty good mix for this. But if you're a more experienced flyer and you want to take your 0802s and make something out of them, yeah, go for it. Do whatever you like, do whatever's fun. I will mention that we have Banggood has their spring sale going on. So down in the video description, there's a coupon sheet, and there are a few things down there, but not a lot that jumps off the page at me. If you're looking for the DJI V2 goggles, you can save, I think it's like $10 or $20 there, so maybe it brings it into your budget range. There's not a lot of quads, but one that I did notice was the AE65, which is a fun little whoop. But that does take the GNB 27 batteries. You can convert that if you choose to, but it comes with the GNB 27 connector, so you have to kind of account that for what you're going to do there. There are a few other items in that sheet that you may be interested in, so I'll leave that link down in the video description. You can see there at the end of our flight, 3.5 volts right on the nose, and that's why I picked that flight. 2.5 minutes of flight time. Because this gnarly FPV subatomic frame was so popular, I thought I would bring it out and just kind of show them to you. They're different, and this is a much different sort of build where this is using an all-in-one loop board. This has got a 16x16 stack. You're going to have to build this versus this is kind of plug and play. You know, if you can handle a screwdriver and plugging in a few sockets, it should be fine. So very different, not just the 1S, 2S thing, but the build process, because you are going to have to do the assembly or the build, depending upon which case it is. And they do fly differently. Some pilots will tell you that there's a dramatic feel between bottom-mounted and top-mounted, and there is a difference. I'm not trying to discount that. It's just in micros, the difference isn't huge, so if you haven't done much flying, you might not notice. If you've done a lot of flying, you might definitely have a preference. I should note that I had to glue my camera in. The Goober canopy that I have here is really made for a more traditional camera with a longer nose on it, the micro cams, like the pinch cam from TinyWhoop. You can also find the BI from NewbieDrone, and it's got a little bracket or brace in there to where you just kind of holds itself into place, and you saw a little bit of this purple or pink canopy in the very top of my view. I could have trimmed that back. It didn't bother me, so I opted not to. did have a crash where I think it was the rear screw kind of popped loose. One of the things I found, and if you look at mine now at that rear spot, see how the board is kind of popping out of the little recess in that rubber mounting. I did find I had to screw some of the screws down a little tighter than I wanted to. I don't think that had an impact on flight performance. I kind of feel like the screws, as you can see here on the bottom, they don't go far enough down, so I really think that Newbie Drone should have included some longer screws. Though, again, depending upon how you fly and how often you crash, you may find you need to purchase some longer screws after the fact. They come with rubber bands, and I've had this so long, I've misplaced the little baggie. I had the rubber bands. The rubber bands it come with, you can see it on the Newbie Drone site. They remind me a lot of like kids' toys, like dolls that they have positioned in the plastics. You can see them on the shelf. They remind me of that material, but they're much, much smaller. I felt this was a lot cleaner, and of course, you know, it's just going to hold the battery, I think, a little bit better. I didn't use a battery pad here. Also, these wires, I think it was the front ones. I spun them around. I didn't have to do this, but it was my kind of technique in order to, you have to bring them around in some capacity. So I went the way that would make them taut, but not terrible tight. That's something to keep in mind when you put yours together. Is you don't want to force those things down in there. So if they don't want to go down in there, you know, manipulate your wires, lay them a little flatter, get that extra ½ millimeter or something where you can make that socket connection, but you're not tugging too hard on your wires on either end. I think it might be this one that I had to fuss with the most. I have seen this frame broken online. I suspect it was a pretty extreme crash. Of course, I generally don't fly over concrete. I just have the concrete patio that I have to worry about crashing. I did have a number of different crashes, especially as I went through the tuning and the tweaking. And like I said, I popped out that screw out of, I think, the back side of the canopy. So I think in most cases, the frame itself will be pretty durable. My only concern is going to be with your motors. You know, there's essentially no prop protection. And if you go with a Levo 2 motor, there's going to be no prop protection. So something to note there, again, 1.5 millimeter shafts are going to last longer, but you can't run Aziz props with 1.5 millimeter shafts. And because of the hub design, you can't even drill them out for 1.5 millimeter. They will just not hold on very well. I took a look at doing that. This print by Digit is great. You see it's got a couple of little holes in both sides of the frame, which you get a cleaner picture on the Newbie Drone website, but they just kind of clip in. There's also a recess right here that's supposed to grab your rubber band, so he did a really nice job of designing these prints. Don't forget to tip your designer. That reminds me, I need to go back and make sure that I did tip him. Sometimes I collect things when I'm on my phone waiting for the kids, and I forget to tip while I'm there. So I need to go back and do that. Good job on this design. I know it's relatively simple, but I think it's simple and well thought out are two things that we need in all designs, especially things that we're going to be crashing so stinking much. I also am curious about the amount of carbon fiber on the plate. Again, someone did break one, at least one that I'm aware of. I think a broken arm. But do we really need 2.5 millimeters of carbon on something this small and this size? It's just me, just a thought. I was thinking 2 millimeters would be plenty. I might want to try 1.5 millimeters, just to drop that weight a little bit and see how it impacts the flight, the performance, the flight time. Also, these Aziz props, I find that these tend to bend up because I did have several crashes. I showed you one where I wanged into the tree, but the props tend to bend, and I think that's a good thing, especially if you're running 1 millimeter shafts. So if the prop bends, then your shaft takes less of the impact and therefore might not get, you know, bent where you have vibrations or jello in your video. That's really all I have to say about it. Good fun. I always enjoy a good light microflyer, and you know, I have so many whoops. Getting something that's whoop-like, that's not prop guarded, because non-prop guarded does fly so much better outside. You know, prop guarded whoops, they have their place. I think their place is inside, but without prop guards, it sure is a lot of fun to just throw it around. Whether it's a playground, a parking lot, or your backyard like mine. Good fun with micros. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the UR UAV UZ80. Comes in two varieties of the all-in-one board, which we've seen many times before. We got Fly Sky and FR Sky D8 mode works best. Speaking of the all-in-one flight controller, it is the Crazy Bee F4 Lite, which features a 5-amp ESC and an F4 flight controller with an OSD, of course. And it also has an integrated camera plug. Motors are branded UR UAV Uzi 0802 19,000 kV. On those motors are HQ 40mm bi-bladed props. It does not come assembled, you have to put it together, but no soldering is required. Also, this is an early production run. This is my rubber band down here. You may find smaller differences with yours. Mine with rubber band weighs 20.5 grams. And it does come with a solid pin PH20 connector, which is the best type of PH20 connector. It doesn't come with any battery, so I flew it on this Nitro Nectar Gold 300 milliamp 1S battery, which brings the weight up to just under 29 grams. Also flew it on this G&B 600 milliamp 1S battery, which makes the weight 35.25 grams. And with a 450 milliamp 1S battery, it weighs just over 33.25 grams. Carbon fiber bottom plate is 1.5 millimeters thick, and on my calipers I'm getting a little over 79 millimeters motor post to motor post. I'm going to show you two flights, well, not full flights. One full flight that we've just taken off here. You probably noticed while we're sitting around the table. There's a fair bit of wind. 11 miles an hour is what the weatherman reports. Of course, down here amongst the trees and behind the houses and stuff, we have some calmer winds, but when I get up in the air, the winds do pick up. So, yeah, can you fly outside and win? Yeah, it just depends on how much wind. But I started to talk about the flight. So the first flight that I'm going to show you is going to be about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Again, it's on the Nubidrone Nitro Nectar Gold 300 milliamp 1S battery. And I'm going to show you the last minute of a 600 milliamp battery. I did not spend a lot of time flying larger batteries, mainly because I felt like I was managing the battery. But if you fly differently than me and you're looking for more flight time, sure, you can fly bigger batteries. It feels different. Whether that's a 450 milliamp or a 520 or a 600. But I'm going to show you the last minute about a minute of a 600 milliamp flight, which comes in at about 4 minutes and 44 seconds. On the Banggood website, they're reporting a lot more fly time than I'm getting. But, fly time varies depending upon how you fly. You could hover something in place for probably a lot longer than you could even just slow cruise. I'm guessing on that. Never really tried that experiment. So flight time varies a little bit. I'm going to get about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So 1S micros have been kind of a recent craze. I shouldn't say craze. Sometimes we forget that there are a lot of people out there working on these things. And, they're doing their own iterations, but they're individuals. They're part of the hobbyist community. So they're not necessarily looking to make a profit or make a product. They're just they're designing something they want to fly and have fun with. But 1S microquads have been around for a while now, and now we're seeing them start to hit the commercial market, which is good for those people that would like to, just buy something. This, again, is a kit. You do have to put the screws in. You do have to kind of hunker things down. And we'll take a quick look back at mine. There's no need for a build video or anything like that. You just plug in things and they should all work, and as long as you put things together right, as far as your props and things of that nature, should work fine. I'm flying the tune that it came with, and I'll put a CLI dump in the video description, along with the hex file that you'll need to flash. If you were having troubles flashing the hex file that I put in the video description, you will need to download an older configurator, or go out and get eMove configurator and use that to flash the hex file that I have down there. You can see the flight's ended. We're a little over, or just about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and our battery came up to 3.6 volts. This is going to be the last about minute of the 600 milliamp flights. I did 2 flights. I just picked one at random, just so you can get an idea. At this point, I've probably got 30 or 40 packs in it, and I suspect my props are a little bit banged up, so you might notice this flight isn't quite as smooth because most of my crashes were pretty minor, really. I fly in the backyard almost exclusively, and so when I crash, if I don't hit something, I'm just landing in the grass. Now, sometimes I do hit some of the objects in the house, in the backyard. Most of the time it's vegetation, but every once in a while I have a pretty big crash, and I'll show you my most major crash after we get past this little segment. That I can just show you my flight. So if you get a fix on flight time, flight style, weight, maybe you're eyeballing this and you're picking up the differences, because I am not as aggressive, I think, with the more weighty battery. But again, that's up to you. You get to choose. Price on this currently listed at $95, but the price is always fluctuating, and we oftentimes see coupons as well. So we're going to wrap up that flight eventually. I have a hard time landing on the table. battery is going to come back up to 3.5 volts. So that's where I want to end my flight. So I mentioned during the flight footage about how these things have been around. Some of you that follow the channel, you'll know about the TKS, Kevin's design. This is going through some additional iteration. I showed it actually in the 3D printed version, which is freely available on Thingiverse. So maybe you would rather have something like this. You could buy this and then transition everything over there, and it will work out for you just fine. I haven't done it myself, but of course, you know, these parts are screw hole pattern and everything like that. The TKS, the 2S version that I'm working on, which is sitting just off camera over here, we're iterating the frame a little bit more there to make sure it's durable, but the 1S version should be fine. And then, of course, it also harkens back to the Unidrone Mosquito, which is very, very similar to the Uzi AE. So these things have been around for a little while, but I think some people enjoy just picking up a line and flying in this case. Here we go. So it's got the typical components that we always see. We've got the Runcam Nano 3. I think I failed to mention that in quick specs with the V2 lens. This might even be a V3 lens at this point, but you can see the image. You have to judge that for yourself. The rubber band, as I mentioned in quick specs, I'm a little bit concerned with it. I guess not concerned. I just don't know what you're going to get. Mine didn't come with the rubber band. Again, this is very early production, so I don't know what they're going to use. But I just did use the square pattern, and I toilet tank my battery through here, plug it in, easy peasy. Still have access to the USB port. You know, there's not a lot of frames on this guy. If I recall correctly, that looks a lot like the HX 100 from Beta FPV. Didn't they do cuts like this? Anyways, so as far as the assembly goes, you notice, hopefully, let me zoom in. We've got one of the nylon screws down here, right above the carbon fiber, and then we have the short standoff. All the standoffs are the same size. And then we put our canopy down, and then we put another nylon standoff on top. The canopy doesn't screw mount like the Unidrone B-Brain. Canopy does. This one needs a nut on top, so it's something to keep in mind with that. But that's pretty much the assembly on all four parts. Of course, you've got screws that you have to put in on all your four motors. Not a big deal, but in. Screwdriver, screwdriver. This is the position I use my antennas, and I've noticed on a few of these boards I've ordered that this antenna can come in various lengths. So if yours is different, it's not necessarily a concern, but I've noticed on some of the boards that I've been buying, because I build so many of these things, and I crash them and fly them, and I give them away and do all those things. So your antenna might be shorter. I've seen a few shorter antennas coming out. This antenna is pretty standard. I just put it right here so that it doesn't flop around and possibly get into our prop. Minor thing, you can see we do have a little bit of camera protection. You can put the super wide field of view on that camera, so the camera is sunken back there a little bit, so if you get on a tree, and that should hit right there. I will play my most dramatic crash right up here, because I think that's important. I just wanged into the tree and it fell to the ground, no big deal. The frame, it's pretty flexible, you know, it's only 1.5 millimeter. There's only so much power you get out of 1S, so I don't know. Held up for me. Could hold up for you if you fly over concrete or if you wang into a pole or something that's going flat. Maybe not, but you know, it flies pretty well. I do wish, what I would do, one thing I would do, I'm always concerned about this, run a little zip tie around here instead of just my rubber band like I've got. That will help make sure you don't pull the battery lead off of the battery pads on the board. Because if you pull those off, you know, just got a trace left. That can be quite difficult. Of course, you could always upgrade this thing or transition it, like I said, over to a TKS frame available at jax3dprinting.com or the Unidrone Mosquito if you choose to go that route. If your frames do break and you're in the US, I know for international friends, getting some of those things can be more difficult. It's a good thing that they use solid pin PH2.0 connectors. As I said, that's the best possible connector that you can have for PH2.0. You can always transition that over to a GNB27 connector, which is this little guy over here. Let me get that to focus a little bit. That connector's been around for a while. I don't have handy a BT20 for Beta FPV, but you could also transition there. Probably get a little bit more flight time, a little bit more power, a little bit more excitement if you chose to go one of those other routes, because they're able to carry more working current. The last thing I think I should say is, you know, see how my wires here are kind of underneath the antenna? I tend to use this wire antenna to hold these wires down. I didn't do a great job in this particular case. there doesn't seem to be enough length to where the wires can get out into the prop. But if you find that the length of wire you've got going to your camera is different, that might be something that you want to be careful about. Tuck that underneath the wire, kind of press the wire down so that it holds those in place. I was talking about the frame here a moment ago, and I kind of forgot to include one thing that I have never seen before in any sort of frame. This thing will bend and hold its shape. Watch. I didn't do it very well. Let me try again. See how it's now curved up? It's slowly coming down. But I noticed early on when I had it sitting here on my table or on my desk, I was actually going through the process of configuring my modes and setting up the Betaflight on it for my specific needs. And I noticed that these arms will hold their shape a little bit when it comes to bending. So if you crash, give the Carbon a little bit of a look over too to make sure all the motors are nice and flat. Something else that I should have mentioned earlier is that these props being up so high, that's not ideal. The further down you can get the prop, which these aren't drilled through, so that's a downside to it. You can drill them through with like a .94 or .95 drill bit. Tinywood.com sells them. You can probably find them on eBay and other places. So if you can get those all the way down to the hub, that will protect the motor shaft from being damaged or bent or even broken off. With the props clear up here, and I flew it just like it came here, and with the props being all the way up here, there's a lot of leverage. Now, the other side of this is that they're bi-bladed props. So tri-bladed props tend to stop cold because they have 2 points on the object that you're hitting, and then the shaft takes an impact, whereas this is unlikely or nearly impossible to have 2 points that connect. But still, if you come in and you hit a tree right up here, it could glance off and be fine. But we don't have, I think in my opinion, the seriousness when you have bi-blades of, taking motor shaft damage. But in the best case scenario, look for like a .94 or .95 drill bit to drill these all the way out and then push those props down. But I have never seen Carbon that does that bending, and you can barely see the weave on the Carbon. Hopefully that comes through in video. That's not necessarily important to me, but it is to other people. I know a lot of people are like, it has to be cut in a certain way. My understanding of Carbon is that what we're looking at is it's like wallpaper. If I'm completely wrong on that, I would be surprised, but I'm prone to be wrong from time to time. Just ask my wife. I always cover the screws, but it's pretty typical for these that you'll find Phillips screws on the motors, and then you'll find hex screws nearly everywhere else. In this case, we also have some nuts, and we've got another Phillips screw right up here to adjust our camera angle. But that was the last point I had for you about this particular frame. I have never seen it before. If you've seen it before, please let me know. Links are down in the video description if you care to check them out. Again, it comes in about $95. It's currently only got 2 vertical versions, Fly Sky and FR Sky. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching. Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the Baby Tooth from FPV Cycle. Powered by FPV Cycle 1202.5 11,500 kV motors on GemFan 3018 props. Down inside there is the FPV Cycle Z's flight controller. It's an all-in-one board with a 6-amp 4-in-1 ESC and an F4 processor. I put the TBS Pro 32 Nano on the backside of my camera, which the camera is the Caddx Ant. Our receiver right here is the RXSR. The way I built mine weighs just under 45 grams. With the G&B 521S battery, it weighs just under 60 grams. Carbon fiber is 2mm thick. Arm thickness is somewhere in 5.5. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting about 115 millimeters. I am using a rubber band to hold the battery with a couple of cheap battery pads. This little part right here is where you would mount your mini Immortal T. I just taped my antennas down. Okay, before we get started, you're going to find people in this video. And it's actually my new neighbor and some contractors. And I was over there before I started flying, and I had my goggles on my head, and eventually the topic of having these strange goggles on my head came up. And so they asked me about them, and I was telling them, well, I was preparing to fly, but things are out here doing what you're doing, I'm probably not going to fly. and they kind of were curious. So then I went over and I grabbed the quad, kind of just showed them everything. I asked them if they'd like to watch. I would go grab a second goggles or a monitor or something like that, and they decided not to because they had business at hand to deal with. And I said, well, if you'd rather I not, I won't. They said, no, go ahead and fly. And then the contractor said, could you fly it over near us? And I said, well, I probably shouldn't do that. It's pretty safe and everything. But anywho, they weren't bothered by the quad. They weren't bothered by me flying. I do take a little extra precaution in making sure that I don't fly over into that space too much. Basically, the punch outs over the house about the only time that we see them. So a little bit of a warning, heads up, don't flame me. So it's all good. We have a very good communal type of neighborhood where we discuss things with each other, and we're very open about all the different things that might be taking place in the neighborhood. So anyways, to the quad, 1S I think it has a big draw because you can get really good performance out of something that is so light, and with that low weight and reduced speed, you get a little bit of extra safety. You're not likely to hurt anyone, or at very least not hurt them very badly. I suppose in a worst case scenario, if someone were to catch a prop right in their eye, that might not be a good thing. But I think the potential for that is so very, very low. And 1S tends to be a little less expensive, especially in the battery department. And so those things are big draws, and I think in general they're also less expensive from a build standpoint. But of course that depends on whether you're comparing a ready to fly or if you're doing something else. So this is Bob's latest creation from FPV Cycle, and he's got a blog posting on his site about the build. There is one little catch that if on the bottom of the new Z board, if you don't short a couple of pads on there, it won't power your receiver, so you have to make sure you short what's necessary for your receiver. But that's all well explained. He's got a tune on there for you to use already, so maybe if you're venturing into your first build and you don't want to take on tuning, you've got a ready-made tuning there. Or if you want to do the tuning yourself and you find it doesn't work out, or you just want to try Bob's tune, you can always flash back. Of course, the tune is specific to the version that comes on the board, and I think he also notes not to update the version on the board. So if you do update and you can't get the tune, you need to go back to the original version, which I believe is Betaflight 4.1. So I've seen a lot of people who have probably have these and have many other configurations, and I think this should be kind of a communal sort of review. Leave your build configuration, maybe if you have a review video or flight footage of this or something very similar. I know for our international friends, getting parts can be difficult. I think RC Groups also has a complete 1S build thread. I'll try to find that and link it down in the video description if you're looking for 1S builds. I think FPV Cycle Bob is trying to keep parts in stock, but they're so popular that can be a little bit of a stretch. You can see there as we come in, I've drained the battery a little bit too far at 3.2 volts per cell, and then we also have a flight time of 3 minutes and 22 seconds. So I kind of have two different versions of this. Actually, I've got a third, but this one is not 1S, and they're all a little bit different from one to the next. Of course, I've got different motors and a different board. On this one, it has an all-in-one board built right into it, or with a receiver built into it. That's a Beta FPV board, and then we've got the Z board here. This, of course, is what I was flying. It's what I showed you in the quick roll. Something to note about the Ant camera, see how it has that mount point right there? You could take your soldering iron and melt a little hole there to use a screw, because I do find that this camera tends to move around. Of course, FPV Cycle has a new camera from Caddx, the Caddx Ant Lite, which I did order a couple of to give a try. I think that would be a better overall fit because of this movement. I think it's also noted that the Ant Lite sticks out a little bit from the B-Brain V2 canopy, so your camera protection might not be where you want it to be, but that's something for you to choose. So on this particular one, to make sure I didn't have any jello, which I did suffer from in this one, you can see I've got some adhesive around here, so I glued that camera in so it does not move around. And you can see I've got quite a bit of camera angle there, and I can still access the USB port with a right angle adapter. If I take my finger here and then I put another finger on this arm, I can kind of pry things up, and then I can get my right angle USB adapter still in there, which is quite handy. It would be easier to get in there if I hadn't done this with my VTX. I decided to put my VTX up here to try to eliminate as much noise as possible. I've seen a few times where I have noise in the video, but it doesn't seem to be static to the motors and the ESC. A few people have called that FR Sky telemetry noise, so I wanted to give some separation between the VTX and the receiver that's embedded down in there. You can see the connector right there. But of course, with this length of screw, I've got some additional camera angle that I could get if I choose to. I just used a simple rubber band to mount my antenna. Works just fine. It's not pretty, but I couldn't get the antenna to clip into the V-Brain canopy mount right there. I wouldn't rely on this, even if you are able to get it to clip in. You want to do something additionally to make sure your antenna does play and stay in there. Otherwise, it could end up down in the props if it were to sneak out of there. The Z board has these little splits in the board itself, so you can get the rubber grommets in and out pretty easily. That works great. I hope we see that on all boards. You can see there we still have some soft mounting, so vibration should be minimized down in there. I did lose 2 props in the crash, and I think I've either chatted or somehow gotten the information from Bob that the reason why he went with this 2mm shafts on his product is so you don't have to use motor screws. And in general, I would agree with that. I just note that I did have a crash where I wanged this off a swing set, and 2 of the props did go flying. Couldn't find those. They're off in the yard somewhere, probably in the mower by now. I think as far as the XT30, you can buy batteries from FPV Cycle that already have the XT30 on them, and this is going to be a little bit controversial, and a few people are going to really disagree with me, and that's okay. We can disagree. I'm not sold that this is necessary for a 1S build. It has the potential upside of being much more robust over a longer period of time, and of course, depending upon your drivetrain, some extra current through here could be good in order to provide you the performance that you want. I didn't find it to be dramatically more than, say, the BT20 connector, and of course, we now on the market have the G&B connector, the G&B 27 connector, which I have just purchased a bunch of batteries from Amazon, and we also have the connectors available on various sources. I think I saw them on eBay and other auction sorts of sites. So you can either convert your own, or you can buy them directly from FPV Cycle if they're in stock. I do find that I like the 520 battery better than the 600. Just that little extra weight, you could just kind of feel it. But if you're looking for extra flight time and maybe your FPV experience isn't to that point where you really notice much difference between weights of batteries, the 600 will give you about 20 to 40 different more seconds, depending upon how you fly, if you want that extra flight time. On the blog post, I didn't get to it, but Bob also has the startup power set at 0.38 for your ESC and your motor timing at high. And so that's a setting that you'll want to make on the ESC. I don't think it comes default with this board. It could change by the time you're watching this video, but that's what I found, that in my particular case, I did find I had to send or change the settings on the board to match those of his recommended settings. I think if I were to build this again, I would probably either use the Caddx Ant Lite that is now carried on FPV Cycle. I think you can buy it directly from Caddx as well. Or if I had the ability to go back to one of the Runcam Nano 3s with the original lens. Now these you can't find anymore because the V2 lens came out, because the V lens wasn't available from its original source after the pandemic. Apparently that company went under or something. So this is one of my last few running V1 Runcam Nano 3s, and I really enjoy the super wide field of view. The Ant Lite, or the Ant, has a much crisper picture. Things are sharper, but its field of view is smaller, and I like the wider field of view. It gives you a greater sense of speed, gives you that sort of pod racing that I sort of talk about all the time that really drew me into FPV. But the Caddx Ant Lite, again, available from FPV Cycle, is another option that you should look at. I can't tell you anything about that. I haven't tried. So you might be looking at these three and saying, which are your favorite? Well, it's not really fair to compare, but I will. I prefer this guy on 3S. I like that extra zip and extra power, and I like my field of view. But you can build one like this and use a different board. Of course, this is only the Z board from FPV Cycle is only 1S, but you can find other boards on FPV Cycle to build the 3S edition as well. So that's my preference if you're asking me. I think I would enjoy this more, probably closer to this one, if I had that wider field of view lens on this one that I do on this one. So kind of an unfair comparison, but yet I know I'm going to be asked, so I need to compare them. As far as these motors, I think they're comparable. I think the flight time on them is a little bit shorter than the FPV Cycle, but I also think the low-end torque on these is a little bit more. So if you're flying low and you need that quick punch, or if you want a different feeling when you're recovering from dives or different things like that, these have a little bit more low end than the FPV Cycle ones do. And you'll also notice I had to use screws on these because they don't have the 2mm hole that the FPV Cycle. Some So that's something else to take into consideration when you're doing your builds. In this particular case, I do have a little bit of a weight savings and a wiring savings in that the receiver is built into the board on this one. So if you're looking for other build ideas, scroll through those comments and see what everybody else is posting. If you posted a video, YouTube is likely going to slurp that off as a spam link. Don't worry, I will approve it. Give me about 24 hours to go through and approve those links. We'll have flight footage from everybody who chooses to submit one if you've got a review video. I would also look at Mr. Shutterbug's channel. I'm sure he's got a video. And Kebab's got to have a couple of videos on this guy already. So check out Kebab FPV as well. You could probably find some of his videos on the FPV Cycle website. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching. Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the Sub 250 Oasis Fly 3.5. Obviously it's a 3.5 inch propped quad, and I would say the standout feature on this is using what I consider to be a small battery, an 850 milliamp 4S battery. I've got it right over here. This one here, you can get a solid 5 minutes of really freestyle ribbage, if you want to say. I thought that was pretty impressive, but the all-in-one flight controller is the Red Fox A3. That is a 45 amp all-in-one. The motors are Sub 250 branded 1804 3450 kV, and on that motor is an HQ 3.5 by 3.5 tri-bladed prop, and it comes with an extra set. Mine is with Express LRS, and the receiver is mounted right here above the 04. It is compatible with the 03 as well as the 04 Lite. It does have separated arms for individual arm replacement, and you can see where they're mounted down through here. Battery connection is an XT30. Flight controller comes with a USB dongle that you better not lose, because this one is a little bit different than the others that I've used. Camera comes with rubber dampening. Got a capacitor down in there, but I can't tell what specs it is. It weighs 199.13 grams. Sub 250 says that it comes in at 245 grams with a 530 milliamp 4S battery, but I don't have one of those batteries, so the closest I can get is this 550. And with that 550, it weighs 253 grams. I didn't use this battery in flight. I did use these batteries in flight. With the 930 milliamp 4S G&B battery, it weighs 299.2 grams. With the Beta FPV Lava battery, it weighs 294.4 grams. With the Sub 250 branded 720 milliamp 4S battery, it weighs 267.58 grams. And with the 650 milliamp 4S G&B battery, it weighs 269.06 grams. Carbon fiber top plate looks like it's 2 millimeters thick. We've got two bottom plates. We've got one from the very bottom out to the nose, and then a sandwich plate on top that goes to the tail. Bottom plate that goes to its tail looks like it's about 3 millimeters thick. And the front plate looks like it's 2 millimeters thick. Front arm is almost 4 millimeters thick and approximately 8 millimeters wide. Rear arm looks to be about the same, 9 millimeters wide. Comes with two sets of rubber dampening for alternate cameras like the 03 or 04 Lite. It does come with bottom feet and screws, which of course those aren't included in the weight that I've showed you. It also comes with side plates, which again, didn't include that in the weight. You get an extra battery mat that's texturized, foam feet, a smattering of mounting screws and replacement screws. In my case, I got an 04 Air Unit manual, a flight controller wiring map, beta flight information on GPS rescue, but I didn't have the version with the GPS. I might be getting trolled because it came with a whole load of stickers. Here we go into my faster flight, and oh boy, a winter is here. It's no longer coming, it's here. Yeah, you'll see some other flight footage when it was a touch warmer. Unfortunately, I did my slower battery testing flight first, that's kind of typically my format when I go through different batteries looking at different flight times, because I know people like to hear that. But boy, by the time I got that stuff concluded, I actually was doing it on a couple of different quads. Notice that prop wash there. We'll get to that here in a minute on those power loops, the prop wash. By the time I got done with the battery testing days, my weather just turned poo-poo. I was experiencing all sorts of wind, rain, and then cold temperatures set in after the rain. And on this day, it's 27 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah. And with what the Weather Channel calls the real feel, or the index, 17 degrees. Winds of 8 to 12 miles an hour, but not terrible considering all the other winds that I had during this time. About the power loops and the prop wash. So a little bit of that is me, but I also think that this could use a bit of a tuning touch-up. It's nothing terrible serious, but again, you know, I show it to you. You saw those first couple of power loops, and I came in a little bit flat. Didn't bring my throttle up quite in time, and then I ended up getting some of that prop wash as we kind of came to the bottom or finishing part of the power loop. And then also at the very top of those zero throttle moves where I punch out over the house or over the chimney, there's a little bit of a shutter that I see there. But sometimes I wonder if my vision just doesn't see it because I remember it in the goggles. And yeah, I almost crashed. But I don't see it nearly as much when I watch back my flight footage. I should say that those that watch the channel regularly, this is a time of year where I don't fly as much. It's a combination of just, bad weather as well as just less daylight. By the time I get home from work, it's probably about 25 minutes. If I get home from work at my normal time, which is kind of a little bit early, got about 25 minutes of kind of flyable daylight, but not really. By the time I gather everything up and go out back, I'm down to probably 15 minutes at best. So this time of year, I have to do a lot of my flying over lunch breaks. I'm using air quotes there. You can't see that. Or I come home from work, or I just work from work, or I have to do most of my flying on the weekends. That just means, during these colder North American months that I just have less time that I can fly. And in this particular case, I had actually gone out earlier with, some of you might be familiar with my heated gloves that I had on the channel from Rubber Quads. I think they still make those, but if they do, they're pretty slick. They're expensive, but they're pretty slick. And even with those, I don't think that I quite get the feel for the quad, the sticks. Then even with my fingertips out, because they have little pop-outs on the glove, they're pretty slick. We'll take a quick peek at them when we get back to the desk. I don't quite have the dexterity and the feel that I think I need to have for the consistency for making review videos. I just don't think that flying with that impediment is right. I wouldn't want somebody to come along in 3-4 months and see a summary video and go, oh man, they see something similar, and then think that flies so much better because I'm not wearing gloves. So I try to be as consistent as possible, even though with the weather, that's not generally feasible this time of year because you're just not comfortable. Like I said, 27 degrees and 17 on the index side of things. So cold, cold, cold. This is one of the few flights that I had during it was about 3 days of flying that I didn't crash out relatively early, so I kind of have to use it. Yeah, I do crash out at the end of the flight, but thankfully it came at almost the perfect time because as I'm sitting there after the crash on the ground, the battery voltage is at 3.5 volts per cell. And then I couldn't turtle out of there. I couldn't get out of the grass. I kind of landed in a little divot. And then as I tried to get out of there, and I turtled myself even further in there trying to clear the props, there was no getting out of it. It was time to end that particular flight, but this is one of the better flights that I had, all things considered. So I thought I should use it. Now, on their website, like I said, in the specs, they have this with a 530 milliamp battery at 245 grams. I suspect that's without all the side plates, the feet, the foam, and all the different parts that you could add to the quad but are going to add weight. I suspect that's a G&B battery, but I don't have any of those, oddly. I have a lot of G&B batteries. I generally have a lot of batteries, but I just don't have the 530s. That's why I waited with the 550, and it was the red label. And so that's one of the higher quality 530s. And I think they say you can get, I would expect, let's not go by what they say, let's go by what I expect. That's a better estimate. Flying like this on a 530, there's our crash, would probably get you in the neighborhood of about 3 minutes of flight like this. As you can see, can't get out of there, so yeah, gotta go pick it up. But the battery voltage is about where I want it, and 5 minutes on the flight time. We're going to jump right into my slower battery testing flight, and this flight will go from DVR to the onboard recording. You can see I've got some water out on the pool deck as we kind of pass by there. This is obviously a much nicer day, 61 degrees, and again, 8 to 10 miles an hour on the wind. Our wind was fairly consistent on the fly days that I did well. There were some high wind fly days where I tried, but boy, my body is not acclimated to the cold. When the winds and the cold came in, I could stand it more than one flight, and I'd have to go back inside for 15, 20, 30 minutes. My fingers were chilled. I was chilled to the bone, so that was kind of difficult. But here is kind of dialing the clock back to a much warmer day. But I wanted to show you this. Give me some time to report the flight times on the batteries that I did test, which I did not test the 720 either, but hopefully this gives you enough. Again, I didn't have as much fly time with the lack of good weather and daylight. But the 930 that I showed in the weights, I got 11 minutes and 30 seconds on average. I have 4 of those batteries, but I flew 3 of them. The 850, I have 4 of those and flew 3 of those. That's the Lava 850s. I got 11 minutes, so pretty close, 30 seconds between the 850 and the 930. And then on the 650, which was another one that I wanted to test out, I got 7 minutes of cruising flight time on the 650. Now, of course, if you want to get under the 250 gram, which is kind of the sub 250 category from this maker, on that 530 that they say brings the weight at 245, at this sort of flight time, I would expect it to be somewhere around the 5.5 minute marker, just based upon I'm speculating it's a G&B battery that's 530 in milliamp hours. Of course, that's a 4S battery, but we've already transitioned into the 4K onboard gyro steady and then back to the DVR. But I wanted to make sure that, maybe you don't fly like I do. You don't have any desire to go out and do flips and rolls and punches and dives and whatever. You just want to cruise around, explore, feel like a bird or a plane or something for a while. Then this is how it flies in that sort of style. And this is with the 930 milliamp battery because this flight goes on forever. So I do want to highlight that I was maxed out on the camera angle on that faster flight, which doesn't quite get me where I want to be. But this is what I presume is fairly standard when it comes to having this little rubber grommet as far as camera angle goes. Even if you remove this piece up here, you can't get more camera angle. Try to get that camera to focus. So this is the max camera angle, and of course it goes almost down to flat. We do have metal pieces up here in the front. You could, damage those or bend those up. It doesn't really provide any camera protection, as do really any of these with the O4 Pros in them. You'll probably get some camera protection if you use the O3 or the O4 Lite that they have available. It actually includes everything in the kit. Something that's interesting to me, and I'm not certain why they have it, is you can see this little metal piece that kind of bows out here. I'm not sure if that's just a design element or if that provides some sort of structural integrity. One of the things that I didn't include, I forgot to mention in the quick specs, is they do actually include 2 extra standoffs. So if you needed them here or here, where the standoffs go on either side, you do have replacements. I didn't highlight that in my quick specs. I noticed that when I was putting everything away. Of course, our battery cable is routed right off the flight controller. I would zip tie that to the edge of the carbon fiber, one side or the other. I haven't said this in a while, but it's a good thing to caution people against. Like, if you do get a battery ejection, and this has nothing but the solder that's holding on to the flight controller, there's some probability that you tug on this hard enough, you get damage down there, and that, is a tedious repair if you even have the skill set to do that. You have to take everything off, and you got to get in there and everything. But a simple zip tie, just kind of pinning this to the side of the carbon fiber where the wire comes through, just kind of running a zip tie through there, gives you something that this can pull against that's not the pads on the flight controller. So that's something that I would do if you're looking at this particular quad, or really any quad. Secure that battery lead with a simple little zip tie. It costs you half a penny or something like that. I do appreciate the battery mat that's texturized. It's actually got their logo and everything in it. Pretty typical stuff for a sub 250 if you're not familiar with these quads. I thought it flew fairly well, but I did think it could use a little bit more touch on the PID tuning. There were some improvements that I thought we could make in prop wash, and then when you got inverted and there was a little bit of that shudder, we've seen that before with a number of other quads. I personally have a video on it's a GEP-RC product. It's a 3-inch Cinewhoop that did that as well, and turning the throttle linearization up to, I think, 100%. Fixed it, but that's, something that it would be better solved in the PID tune than doing that, but it was simple, something that was suggested to me, so I tried that first, and it did help. So if you're looking at this quad or any quad that has that little shimmer when you go inverted, you punch out and you get off throttle at 0 throttle, and it kind of wobbles just a touch. You can see it in that HD video. You can try throttle linearization, otherwise you're going to have to start tweaking it too. Something that I've noticed in the past with some of these quads, when they have 3D prints for holding in our antenna here, that they can be difficult to route through, because I did have to do that on this particular quad. In this particular case, I didn't have any troubles. The hole size that they have, the UFL connector slid right down through, so no issue there. I just want to highlight that because sometimes I've seen them be too small or they're at such an angle on 3D prints that it takes quite a bit of finessing because you don't want to damage the UFO connector to get them down through, and that's really your only option in some of these print designs. Of course, if you're using an 03, they've got a single mount down here for you, as well as a T-mount for Express LRS or any other T-mounted style antenna you got. I didn't have any troubles with anything coming apart or really any damage, even in the cold. In that, I showed you kind of a light crash. These props have seen other crashes, and I've got some debris and stuff that I kind of cleaned off the quad. It's right down here now. Most of my other crashes were pretty minor. You know, I was getting too cold. I needed to go inside and warm back up before I came back out, or I was ridiculously trying to fly in too high of winds. When it was decent out, like 40s, our winds were between 20 and 33 miles per hour, but I would still go out and try to fly it just because sometimes you got an itch and you got to go try, right? I thought it was a pretty efficient unit. I do think that you can probably expect to get, if you were to put an 1100 milliamp battery, say you don't care about the 250 grams or it doesn't apply wherever you are, and you just wanted to go for max flight time in that sort of exploratory sort of flight, an 1100 milliamp battery is probably going to get you somewhere around 14-15 minutes, maybe. I'm estimating there based upon the 930 getting 11 minutes and 30 seconds, and the fact that it was relatively cool at 61 degrees. You know, warmer temperatures, batteries like that a little bit more. I've got some more debris up here too, Chief. But overall, it's a pretty solid quad. I don't really have anything to complain about when it comes to mounting. They include extra screws if you'd go with the 03. Maybe you have an 03 on hand. You're going to mount it up in here. It does give you accessibility right to everything because it's just an open tail in here. They did use my favorite motor wire tape here on the motor wires to keep those down, keep those out of the prop line. We see that more and more and more, which is a nice thing. When it comes to removing the arms, I guess we can highlight that just a touch. Looks like got 1, 2, 3 screws for each arm. One of those screws is holding in the flight controller, so you'll probably have to hold on to that nut that's right there when removing that screw to replace an arm. First, you'll have to cut the motor wire tape, take the motor screws out in order to be able to replace that arm. I suspect they have options when you buy this of buying extra arms, extra props, batteries. Most sites are doing that now anyways. When you move up in prop size, you know, I do mostly micros, just about exclusively on micros. When you get closer and closer to that 4 and 5 inch, you gain efficiency in the prop size, but you can still stay relatively small. And in this particular case, you know, you've got the props out of use, so if you like to do the classic cinematic sort of flying, you could do that with this. I thought the freestyle or rippage sort of flight was pretty fun and enjoyable, even in the cold state that I was trying it in. And, oh yeah, the gloves that I mentioned. So these are the gloves that I oftentimes use this time of year, but I don't use these when I'm flying in my preferred flight style, the more faster freestyle sort. They got a texture here real quick. You can pop out your thumb and your finger, and I have to actually squish these back a little bit. But I do feel like I still don't have the dexterity that I'm quite looking for in order to be consistent across videos. So I tend to not use gloves. I tend to just bear the cold and do the best I can with hand warmers in my pockets and stuff like this. These are heated, and this pattern in here is where the heat comes from. There is a battery in this little zipper down here. Then it has a power button right here. If you long press it, it should turn on for us here in just a second. Yeah, there we go. And then you press the power button. Short presses give you a different temperature ability. But expensive. Rubber quads, if they have them, check them out, rubberquads.com. I know a number of people last year when I got these did buy them. If you have a set, let me know what you think of them. I wouldn't suggest these for like shoveling snow, which we did get snow directly after the freestyle flight that I showed you. And then me and the girls, because our son is off at college, me and the girls went out and we shoveled ours, we shoveled our neighbor's driveway, and then we did the sidewalk all the way around our cul-de-sac just to be friendly and neighborly, and you're outside and you're already sweaty, so why not? But that's enough about these. As I'm recording this, I don't have a price point. I suspect it comes with different versions and things of that nature, but if you're speculating, let's do a little guessing game and put your guess for what the price with an 04 Pro as well as an Express LRS receiver is down in the comment section. And then when we go to visit the site, which there'll be a link down in the video description, you can see how close we were because I've got my own number in my head, and I'll put my number in the pinned comment. If you do have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise about the Oasis Fly 3.5 from sub 250, please let me know in those comments section below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching. Hello everyone, looking for a drone that has prop protection, has GPS, waterproof, floats, it has top and bottom mount battery options? Well, the Hulk 3 Mini has all those features. One part of this that you might be interested in, even if you're not interested in the rest of the quad, and that is this CNC aluminum waterproofing housing for your 04. It incorporates everything you would need to mount an 04. You do have to decase the camera to get it in there, but as you can see, it just uses a standardized plug, so this may come in handy for other quads that has a two-finger mount to it, and it is just called the Darwin FPV 04 Pro CNC aluminum waterproof protective case. The ESC and the flight controllers do have interesting names. The F4 Cement waterproof flight controller and the Cement waterproof 60 amp ESC. See them right here. The motors are called Seawater 2006.5 2200 kV, and the props on those motors are Gemfan D90S tri-bladed props. The recommended battery is a 6S 1300, which you can buy with the quad directly from Darwin FPV, but I do micros, and these are the largest 6S batteries I have, so that's what I tested. The GPS module under here is the Darwin FPV M1018 GPS. I removed the flotation device. You can see where you can top mount the battery if you wanted to. There's a battery pad right there. With the main feature of this that separates it from other quads is the flotation and the waterproof. I flew it with the flotation device in all the time. But for good measure, there's the battery pad on the bottom. 3D print back here for various antenna connections. The mount that you use for your 04 is also what they'll use for an analog camera. Would it be right in here? And then if you're running an analog camera, you could use an external HD camera. So just the 6S 1050 weighs 180 grams, so this is all going to be way over 250 grams, so I'm going to skip all the weights, because my scale doesn't even go high enough. Carbon fiber is 3.5 millimeters thick, and motor post to motor post, I'm getting a little over 151 millimeters. It does come with two flotation devices. You might call this a pool noodle. You use this piece on the bottom strapping just to kind of help the quad stay flat when you have a battery mounted down there, but I didn't use it. We got various pieces of foam. We have an extra USB-C plug. You'll notice on the flight controller I had one in there and some zip ties. You would put the foam around here for a little extra protection, but unless you're flying inside, I don't think that's necessary. We've got several small packages of thermal paste, which I think you probably use that on either the flight controller or the ESC. We've also got a screw kit in here, some heat shrink, a couple other random screws that I probably put in there, and a wrench. Don't know if it's standard, but it did come with a little screwdriver kit. Kind of cute. Came with this card, this card, this card, this brochure, and one sheet of stickers. We're going to start off with what I would consider probably ideal for this style or design of quad. You know, prop protection, cinematic, sort of filming with your shots, safe, and as prop protection. So the winds in this particular case are only 5 to 7 miles an hour, and quite honestly, couldn't hardly feel it. So 5 to 7 miles an hour might be up above the tree line or up above the house, which we do fly in this particular view. If you're not used to my videos, well, subscribe so you can come back again. But what I'll be doing during the course of the flight samples, because this does fly for anywhere from 5.5 to 6.5 minutes, or actually 6 minutes and 50 seconds, is we're only going to do samples of the various flights that I've got to show you. And we transitioned, as we already have, from the goggle view over to the gyro stabilized or the rock steady view of the 04. And then we'll transition back after about a minute and a half of rock steady or gyro stabilized view back to the DVR view. I do that because the DVR view does not have any stabilization, so you get a good idea of how smooth the quad is without the stabilization, and then you can incorporate the stabilization stabilization, whether it's the Rocksteady that comes with the 04 or something software-wise outside of the 04 that you might have experience with or want to use for your purposes. It does feel like this quad is a very specialized niche sort of quad. You know, it's going to be up there in weight, so the 250 grams limit and other limits that we have throughout the globe might not be friendly to this one. But I think if you're doing professional filming, maybe, but I don't know if you're doing professional filming if you would be using an 04 or if you would be using something else. I thought, especially for movies and bigger productions, they were using much larger cameras, you know, $10,000, $20,000 cameras. But I don't really get into that arena at all, so many of you out there would probably know whether this particular quad would even be of use, or if this is just those of you that like to use the 04 to get your shot. Maybe there are markets to sell the footage, like there used to be for a photo back in the day, that you can go to a place, a beach, a cliff, or something like that, and then you need something that floats, so if you do go down in the water, that it does come back up to the surface so you can fish it out with, you know, the help of a boat or something like that. And as I already showed you, you know, we have a pool, so I dunked it in the pool a bunch of times. I think I could just 6 times. And granted, I think I could have done a better job. I did not think of that until I put together all my footage here, that I should have just disarmed, because I'm getting a little bit of that air mode bounce off the pool. It did have air mode on. So I should have just disarmed and just kind of dunk it and then take off from there. My apologies. I should have thought of that before I'd gotten to this stage where I'm actually putting the video together. Actually re-recording most of the narration because of that thought occurred to me after I put most of this together. But we've seen several minutes. Let's move on to less than ideal condition for this particular quad. That is going to be in 9 to 20 mile an hour winds. Still flying slow, not at the max camera angle yet. We will get to the max camera angle, and then if you're wondering about the max camera angle, we'll cover that kind of first when we go back to the desk. You are limited to how much camera angle you can get. I think there are some things that you can kind of work around to get a little bit more than what I show in the next flight, but it's going to depend on your comfort level with doing those things. So again, this is the DVR footage. You can see we've got satellites up there where I don't think in the first sample we had satellites. It does not get satellites fast, and several of you have talked about how some GPSs do not get satellites fast, and especially like the first flight of the day, they can take a little bit longer. I don't have a ton of experience with GPS, but I can tell you, having another quad that I've recently started flying that does have GPS, this one does not get GPS as fast as the one that will be coming up on the channel. So oddly enough, we're bouncing between 4 and 0 there on the satellites. Kind of a fun thing. It did have the speed, which it generally is 12 to 13 kilometers per hour. I am flying a little bit faster. That's not necessarily intended. It's just kind of my natural sort of flight progression. Is I'm always trying to kind of push the nose down and fly a little bit faster. My true, faster, more aerobatic, freestyle-ish sort of flight will be coming up in the next segment. 80 degrees, by the way. So we're still here in mid-October having relatively nice days. You can see the grass is still green, although a lot of leaves have fallen. So we're going to see a lot more leaves on the grass. I think this flight happens to be shortly after our lawn service came and cut the grass. So we don't have too many leaves, but even the pool itself has a lot more, or the cover has a lot more leaves. But at this point, I'm just kind of flying around and trying to get up in this wind a little bit so you can get a better idea. Even though the tree leaves aren't moving around a lot, we have gusts, and you may be able to hear that in my flight audio that come up, and you'll be able to discern how this is handling the wind. I thought myself, you know, it's a big, heavy quad. It's going to handle the wind to a certain degree pretty well. It's still crop protected, so it's got those surfaces that the wind can press against and cause some dirty air through your motors, but I don't think in this case it's gonna have to be windier, or in a specific flight situation where the wind is kind of directionally hitting the quad to cause much of an issue at even say 20 miles an hour. Let's move on to my traditional more faster. We're getting up to 16 and 17 kilometers per hour, but let's move on to my faster flight. This is max camera angle. Again, we'll cover this when we get back to the desk. This is a different day. don't think we're going to see any satellites during this flight. Most of my flights during my faster day of flying this were relatively short. I'm doing the 850 in this particular case. Oh, that reminds me, cinematic or slower sorts of flight times. I should report on the 1050s. I got around 6 minutes and 50 seconds, so you could probably get that close to 7 minutes. My 6S batteries are not fresh, but I don't fly much 6S, so they haven't been heavily used either. On the 850 slow cinematic flying, about 5 minutes and 20 seconds. And again, I don't have larger 6S batteries to test. The recommended battery is a 1300 milliamp battery, and I just don't have any of those. So I do micros if you're not familiar with them. Usually, this is about as big as I get, especially when it comes to the battery size. I've rarely used 6S batteries. There was a short time where we had a few 2.5 to 3 inches that use 6S, and that's why I have 6S batteries. But you know, bigger cinematic sort of 6S batteries. But as far as the freestyle-ish sort of flight, it kind of flew like you expected. It really, I think most people, if you wanted to fly it this way, you're going to be doing more straight line stuff, whereas in my backyard, you're going to be doing a lot of weaving. But it's still very manageable, obviously, and even though it is kind of a heavy quad, it slides in those hard turning moments, so you just have to counter that with more angle on your embankment of turn, as well as more pitch and more yaw, as you just try to hold your line and carry that weight. Again, I am flying this in all these flights with the, as I've been calling it, the flotation device, the foam noodle in the back, so I'm a bottom-mounted battery in all these flights as well. I did that intentionally because I felt like that was the most likely scenario somebody would be looking at this quad, is that you need that flotation in there. Otherwise, you probably would look at something that's not crop protection and not necessarily waterproof. And that takes a big part of its feature set and separates it out from the rest of the quads that might be available for filming sorts of purposes. This is fairly unique, as I said before. So I think it'll be fairly specific to those of you that need not just one of those features, but probably all those features. The full flight here, I think I said it. Hopefully I said it. I don't script these things, if you can't tell. This is on the 850, the full Send 850 6S battery. I did not fly fast on the 1050s. I tend to stay a little bit lighter when it comes to my more aggressive flight, especially flying in my backyard, which if I haven't mentioned it before and you haven't seen it on the channel, the back fence line is 251 feet. And I'm not sure the distance on the front side of the backyard fence line. I would say it's probably 70 or 65% of that distance. So 200, maybe 190 feet. To give you some idea of the space. And of course we've got trees and we've got the outdoor living space and stuff like that out there that I'm working around. And going with the bigger battery just makes it a little bit more risky as far as me hitting something and damaging it. So I bonk off the pergola and I go through that window that's right in our kitchen area. I don't know how I missed that little decorative item as I swung in there. How did I miss that thing? But that's the end of the flight. You can see I went 3 minutes and 35 seconds. A little bit long on the battery though. Okay, so as I said, we're going to start with the camera angle and this waterproof mount. You can see where the screw hits the carbon fiber right there. Now you can pry the carbon fiber apart, as you might be able to see here, probably only on one side. And then you could shove it back a little bit more, like I did there. And then you hit the rear post back here. So even where I was at, let me see if I can get this to just go right there. Well, dang it. I was hoping to just move it right there. That was the camera angle I was flying at. And then the max, put this apart, is right there. So that is, unless you start to remove parts of this quad, that's the max angle. But a couple of things I wanted to point out that I thought were fairly interesting about this particular setup. So the USB-C is available without taking out your mount screw. You can actually get to it, and there's a little tiny finger hole, if I can get the light on here, that they've cut into there to where you can pop this out after you get the screws out, and you can get USB-C access across. Of course, on the other side, we have our bind button, which does line up if you mount it correctly. It does line up. And if you do this waterproofing stuff, something else to be careful of, a mistake I made It has two of these really small rings, and they go apart. Up in the front part, there's a little groove or track. Like if you work on cars, you know, they.
Wow. Six months ago.
This is my brand new MRX, Atomic MRX Master Edition. I picked it up a couple of days ago. And it took 4.5 hours for the car to look like that. I finally received my DWS conversion.
Buongiorno a tutti ragazzi, bentrovati sul mio canale. Oggi monterò l'ultimo upgrade alla mia MR.
I'm going to finally try my MRX with the 3500 motor in Dexon body.
E prova in pista
Adesso vi spiego.
e una marea di auto
Che fa
nel suo
piacere.
tempo, però questa in particolare ci premeva
E
che secondo nostro
sia in circo nostro.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're going to cover some Mini Z material, but first I just want to give everybody a heads up. For those who don't subscribe to the channel, please do and give this video a like. I have some big news coming for the next video, hopefully by this weekend. Some big projects on the horizon, and I'm really excited to share it with you guys. So please stay tuned. Big news coming up in the next one. So quickly, we had our most recent race at the community center, our local Mini Z club. It was a great track, really wide open this time, lots of sweeping high-speed corners, really testing the limits of grip at higher speeds. My type of track, and I really enjoyed it. First with the MR03, it ran extremely well. It was really stable and consistent. I had a lot of fun with it. The one thing I did add this time was Gulf tape. So in our rules, we are permitted to add weights to the car to give it a little bit more heft and more stability on the track. So what I did is I added some Gulf tape, which is a common method of adding weight to the box stock Mini Zs. So that seemed to work very well, and the car overall ran really well. I think we mentioned last time that I replaced the front wheels back to stock. I had some +2 offsets on the front before, and upon doing a little bit of research, having experienced a lot of skittish and sporadic steering behavior, that the wider the offset you go on the front from stock, the more sensitive your steering is because of the scrub angles.
透视很多画手永远的痛，学再多透视理论，永远停留在画正方体。随手摸出任何板子、iPad、卫生纸，和七根村长一起做个透视热玛吉，把死板的透视理论升华成能让你天马行空玩场景、人体透视的透视第六感。啪啪就哦！射线运动，从一点向四周画射线，每隔大概22.5度画一根。角度不需要太精确，只会一条线比一条线有规律跟倾斜，这就是未来丢掉参考、自由透视的本质。加速，我看在同样的线，每一笔向下多加一笔，也会多了一个转角，一根倾斜，多画一根。射线，每隔射线运动，从一点向四周画射线，每隔大概22.5度画一根。角度不需要太精确，只会一条线比一条线有规律跟倾斜，这就是未来丢掉参考、自由透视的本质。加速，我看在同样的线，每一笔向下多加一笔，也会多了一个转角，就把平面的线条变成立体书页的感觉。圆盘运动，先画一条横线，代表完全平视圆盘，再往上画横扁的椭圆，一个比一个更圆，再圆一点，体会一个圆比一个圆更圆带来的立体感。圆盘中间穿一条棍子，想象一串烤土豆片，土豆片压棍子，还是棍子压土豆片。和左边的圆盘对应，也是中间横线，但这一次变成一根比一根更倾斜的这种折线，不需要精确，但保持住一条比一条更有规律的更倾斜。每两组线竖方向连接 ，go go go， 想象它们的立体感。补完它们的底面，想象再看一个雄伟的 creeper。Go go。Good， 边框透视训练只用边缘来表达体积感，暗示一些内部。Beautiful， 针对我们的来一个，通过边缘去识别透视物体，是透视了时机的避讳绝技。里面有一点对不上也没有关系，把上面的方盒子变成圆角盒子。这种练习能帮你从只能画 Minecraft 播到人体透视的衔接秘诀，完全上也没有关系。把上面的方盒子变成圆角盒子。这种练习能帮你从只能画 Minecraft 播到人体透视的衔接秘诀，完全不理解的村民也不用紧张。生长的话，健身操里都是可以先跟着像写字一样玩熟这些图形。未来学到某个知识点，会顿悟成长这些不起眼的健身操里藏着的奥义。小 boss 战麻将练习，拿一块块麻将围成一圈。进阶一点村民依然可以继续边框透视。训练这个我非常烧脑，但是没有关系，即使当成直线训练，硬记住这些图形也是非常不错的训练。仔细体会一条线一条线更倾斜的规律。同学们有没有看过那种经常画一大群俯视仰视人体炫酷透视的画师？他们安排每一个人物的时候，大脑里想的正是这种麻将牌。暗示一些结构线，看看自己有没有差不多画正确。加油，出口就在眼前 ，Go！ 终点训练，同一个点发射两条射线，得到一个透视平面，连接对角线就是终点。从这个点再连终点，就得到中线。脱离消失点，再来一遍。终点，幻想一条直线，再来一遍。直线变虚线。最后一次，完全甩掉透视安全套，逼出透视感，现实一点变上。大 boss 战，立体文字练习，随机勾勒一些文字 ，Go Go 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 Go。纸张上随机找一点，发出射线，连接文字每个转角，调动透视感，保住一条线比一条线更倾斜。Good Go， 大脑快速运算，让它冲散狂转，看哪个转角能看到线，哪里不能看到线。 这个训练既可以熟悉文字涂鸦，又可以训练给物体挖空和凸起，把机甲武器舰娘必备技艺。Beautiful， 画得很爽的村民大声呼喊“鲁棒”，也记得关注点赞，能跟村长练出马甲线。哎呦！
Was when I first got these, they were allowed to bind, and I'm in the specs, we're going to go for some flight, but I'm going to talk about the headaches that I have with this and why for anybody getting in, I just do not recommend it. Now look, Cadex is not going to like me saying this, that doesn't mean that it is all bad. There is an edge case where I say, hey, these users probably will really like this system, but for everybody else who wants cheap digital, put in a VRX and able to feed it into our goggles, I am feeling disappointed. So we're going to go through my experiences with this system, talk about the text and the specs as a bit of an overview. I'm going to put the stats on the screen, like 1080p, we've got 100 frames per second, we've got DVR in here, it's got like all your little menu options, it's very, very similar if you're used to flying around with a system like the traditional Walksnail system. And a big one, look, and I'll put it on the screen, it is a pretty budget price to get all of this, but budget doesn't always mean that it is worth it, and I'm going to explain why. So in a moment, we're just about to go out for a little flight, but I have some things which I absolutely cannot understand why they have done this. This is a module. It goes on the front, just like here. I think this is my HD0 module. You can put that on the front of your goggles, but this one, how are you meant to mount this thing? It is an absolute nightmare to try to mount this. Underneath, yes, you do have like this little traditional tripod screw, but you can't actually screw it in very well because you've got your HDMI on one side, you've got your power cord on one side. So unless you have a specific cable, and don't even get me started on cables. I don't know who was in charge of that, but they're going to get in trouble after watching this video because you just can't mount this thing easily. And then you are tethered to this, you can't move around easy. I did not like mounting this. It was a nightmare no matter how I tried to fly around and connect this up to my goggles. But Stuart, how are you meant to connect that? Surely they give you some cables that just simply plug in there. Well, that would be nice because you do get this cable right here, which is a HDMI cable. It goes right here. It has the HDMI feed from your Ascent VRX. And then, of course, what is Cadex's flagship goggle? Well, I've got one right here. This is the Goggle X. Do you think that this is easy to connect up? Absolutely not. This cable does not fit into the bottom of the goggles that we've got right here. So the cable that Cadex gives you, you need to go out and find another one. Now, luckily, I can't believe this, I actually found the correct adapter from Runcam of all people when I was looking at one of their open IPC links. So you're going to see me using this cable. I don't know why Cadex couldn't just do a bit of research and think, hey, you know our flagship product, maybe we should make our new product work with that. All it takes is a cable. No, they gave you this piece of junk right here, which is not going to be helpful to anybody. The other part as well, you get this little power cable, and that is to let you connect it up so you can simply power both of your things at once. And this wouldn't be too much of a problem, except there's no way to easily mount this at all. It doesn't have any traditional like you do get, where are they? You get these little pieces of plastic or like rubber stickies. They're meant to help some people. There's no way to stick this on here. And if you think, oh, well, I will mount it to a tripod somehow, well, you can't get very far. You have to stand right next to your tripod when your battery cable is only this long. So this, Cadex, if you're watching as well, whoever's in charge of cables, needs to be like 4 foot long. And please have 2 cables running off that are both 4 foot long. That would make this a much better solution than whatever we've got here. The cables, absolutely disgusting, but it gets even better. You would think, right? I just bought a new Cadex VRX. I've just bought some new Ascent Lite compatible VTXs. They're going to work together? No, you need to make sure that you update both of these because for some reason, they're not going to work until you update both of them. Updating the Ascent Lite VTX in here was actually a bit of a breeze. I was pleasantly surprised. So A+, whoever did that app, there's no nonsense. It's just like click a button. Took about 20 seconds and that was done. So that was no problem. The VRX, you update that by putting an SD card in here, holding the link button for about 8 seconds. It'll go through and do its thing. Mine actually froze halfway through that. I don't know what the issue was. I left it for about 10 minutes, came back, it was still stuck on a completely white screen, unplugged it, and then turned it back on, fingers crossed, and it seemed to have worked. Now, in a moment, we're going to go for a flight, but check out how loud this is as well. This is the loudest VTX you have ever heard, so it does a bit of a beep on startup. I'm going to hold it near my microphone right here, and I hope that this comes through because it's ridiculous. So, maybe. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. So it actually sounds like I'm using a hairdryer right here. I've turned on the air conditioner, so it's extremely loud as well. It is far louder than any other goggle or any other VRX that I've ever tested. But let's go for a flight, and you're going to see me. I had to test this with a few different sets of goggles because I flew around with these ones right here, the Goggles X. You would think that this is who Cadex would want them to work with. I had some issues. You're going to see me flying around with Sky Zones. I'm not even going to get into latency about the O4 Pros. That's for another day and for some other angry people. And then I do need to talk about the Ascent Light goggles that they have right here, because there might be some light at the end of the tunnel. So let's go look at the flight footage, and yeah, it's going to be juddery. You let me know what you think, and then we'll come back here and we will finish the autopsy of the Warp Snail Ascent VRX. So let's check it out in 3, 2, 1.
Alright, so here we go. So you're going to see actually two flights right now, because the first one I'm using the Cadex X goggles, and then you're going to see me switch over to my Sky Zones. And that's for a reason, because it got a little bit sketchy actually. Now flying around, looking at the image quality and everything, I feel like the Ascent VTX and the Ascent system looks really good when the image is still, but when you are moving, a couple of these details tend to blend together. Look, it doesn't have to be perfect because it is a $35 VTX and a really cheap VRX. But when I'm flying this around too, I have my head mounted sideways, or I guess it's mounted sideways on my head, trying to put it up there. But also right there, I lost video for that. So something is going on in the link between my Goggles X, and I just didn't have any confidence. But let's try it around now with my Sky Zone goggles. Right, so here we go with take 2, and this one is different because I'm using my Sky Zones and I'm standing sideways, so my VRX is on the side of my head, so I'm getting the best like antenna reception and everything over here. Then that's because there is no real nice way to put this either on a ground station, on your head. I know I keep going on about it, but it is not easy to do it. I felt like the VRX was going to fall over. That's going to result in some bad images and like low reception, all that sort of stuff. The way that this is mounted in cables, like 0 out of 10. I do not like that at all. And then let's talk about the actual video. So this is very similar to the Ascent Protoss that I tested, although this is on the later firmware. I do notice like there is a little bit of juddering as it was sort of turning. The best way to describe it is like flicking through a really high resolution flip book, sort of seeing some of those images on those hard yaws and everything like that. And the other part, when you are cruising this around, it looks really good when the image is still, but in some fast motion, those fine details tend to blur together as well. So I think like if I just hit pause just here, we'll have a look at some of the trees in the distance. Some of these, it starts to blur together just a little bit. It's not terrible, but I don't think you can expect too much as well from like a $35 VRX and also a really, really cheap VTX and also a really, really cheap VRX. So here we go. I would say I had fun with this, but it's not my recommendation. This Ascent system is best when it is paired with the Ascent Light goggles. The VRX is in a really tricky spot where if you already have a set of goggles that has HDMI in, there's probably some other options out there. If you've got HD0 or if you've got Warp Snail, just keep using those systems. This, it is trying to go after a market to get people in for cheap digital, but the way that it is going about it and the inability to easily incorporate it into a system, let alone their own system with some goggles, is just a bit of a nightmare. I will say though that the Lightning V2, like it fits this quad beautifully, and I like that this VTX is actually the smallest one that we had. So you could have a lot of fun with this. It does need to fix the jitter and just the mounting. So here you can go, like all those wires hang off my head. It's never a good day.
If it get much worse or is any light at the end of the tunnel, well, the Ascent VRX, I don't actually recommend this to very many pilots whatsoever, because if you already have a set of goggles like these right here, you're golden. Just stick to the Warp Snail system. You don't need to jump over to the Ascent. And if you are thinking about jumping in and trying cheap digital, well, then you have to weigh this up against something like the Beta FPV P1 system, which performs much better. I really liked it. It felt much more stable and smooth versus the jitters that I kind of had when I was flying around with this. It almost felt like I was flipping through a page book sometime. It was sort of jumping around. It just was not a very pleasant flight experience. What's some good news? Well, this is where I would love to say that if you were flying this system around and you could get the speed on these Ascent Light goggles right here, I think that might be acceptable. It's still going to be a trade-off between jitteriness and comfort. These goggles right here are really comfy. I do really like the Warp Snail Ascent goggles like these ones right here. I think they do a great job. However, in my testing, I back and re-bind these up, because when I first got these, they were allowed to bind, and this is where I owe you an apology. These are on some very, very early firmware. I updated these VTXs to work with my Ascent VRX. Then they are no longer compatible with this. I need to update the firmware on these goggles. I'm not going to do that though. This firmware, it is extreme, like a very, very early prototype. I don't want to lose this. There is no way to go back to this. This is the only time when it would ever go black and white. Do some strange behavior. So the firmware that is on these goggles is probably very, very limited in the world. Until I find a way to back that up, I don't want to lose having access to that early firmware. So if you have those goggles, you might still think about, hey, well, flying around, getting a $30 VTX, I think it's going to be okay. But for everybody else, it's not going to be great. Now, Cadex, if you are still watching, shout out to them, because I do think that they take feedback in the things we say. This is not trying to just bash on and hate Cadex. This is purely talking about this product, what they can do to improve. Number one, you need to get much better with your cables. Give us like 3 times as many cables, different sizes, so people who get this, they don't have to go out and source their own. But you need to, as a priority, get a cable that works between the Goggles X and this VRX. That should be fixed. You need to provide some way as well to mount this better, and that might mean, please, like, I can think of a solution here. Give us like a little TPU mount or something. You've already got these antenna placements right here. You might be able to have a flat plate, then they can stick that to. Provide us with a chest mount maybe, that this can hang here if people want to fly that way. And that also means you need to provide us with the correct power cable that's going to be powering this, and have enough room to get to our goggles. Or if you say this is for a tripod, that can go over there as well and bind to that. So look, I had better results flying this around on my Sky Zones, believe it or not, than on my Goggles X, which is crazy because this is the goggle we are supposed to use. I would have loved to test them on the HD0 goggles, but I don't have those. And overall, I don't recommend the Cadex Ascent VRX.
What's up, my friend? Welcome back to the channel. Today I have a review of HD0's new gamepad style controller. It just came out a few days ago, and again, I'm not a huge fan of companies saying that they're going to have a release date and an exact time, because what that does is that floods your YouTube feed with 10 different reviews of the same product. It's kind of stupid, and it's kind of annoying. So companies that are in the FPV industry, please stop doing these release dates and making everybody flood the YouTubes with their reviews of everything. So I know that guys watching this video don't want to see everybody's review either. So I've waited a couple days to come out with this because of that very reason, and so that I could bring you something that maybe the other reviews didn't bring you. So today we're going to talk about this new radio. We're going to talk about why it could be one of the ultimate beginner radios. It is in the mid-range price point. I have seen that the price went down to around $55 for the radio. This is the case right here. It is an ELRS radio, but what stands out from the other radios that are the competitor radios we're going to talk about in this review, the T8L from Radio Master, starts about $35. And while this is the cheapest one, you have to realize something. This one doesn't come with batteries. So when you buy 2 18650s, you're probably going to be around the $45 range at the end of the day, even if you get the cheapest 18650 batteries to go with it. This one is about $45, comes with batteries built into it, but this one comes with a battery built into it, and it is actually the largest battery out of them, which is a 1S 4000 milliamp. And again, all of these radios are not created equal. Both of these are 100 milliwatt for the maximum power range. They can go down to about 10 milliwatt for around house flying. When you go out in the backyard or in a big field, you can crank it up to 100, but that's the maximum amount of power you're going to get off of both of these radios. The HD0 radio comes in at 250 milliwatt max, so that means you could use this one for a little larger type of drones that go out a little bit further. And one of the reasons that I say it's probably one of the easiest beginner radios is because of a feature that they built into this one that these other radios don't have. Number one, these don't have screens. They don't have a screen on here for you to navigate inside the radio for ELRS, things like that. They only have bind buttons, which you long press, they start the bind process, but you don't have a screen on those, which, you know, in a way makes it more beginner friendly, but at the end of the day, once you learn how to use the radio a little bit, you're probably going to miss having a screen on there, in my opinion. So let's talk about this radio. Let me go ahead and open up the case for you. This has one zipper here. It does have a little rubber cover on it, which is nice. It's pretty compact. It would be nice for travel or using it as your FPV simulator radio. And if I open this up, you'll see that the strap of the radio goes across where the power button is. And I know that MadsTech had mentioned this, but there's a pretty easy fix for this problem. The problem was that when you close the case, it could sometimes turn on the radio. I didn't have that experience with it, but if that bothers you, all you really have to do to fix it is just move it above where the lanyard hook is, and problem fixed right there. So pretty easy fix. There's also probably a 3D print that will come out that will maybe cover up the radio button, but I didn't have that issue, honestly. I also got a couple accessories in the case, which is the lanyard, which is pretty nice. This goes on the middle of the radio, goes around your neck, keeps you from dropping the radio to the ground, which I have done multiple times with my radios. It also comes with a USB-C cable for charging up the radio's internal battery, which is nice. Okay, so let's talk about the radio, and let's talk about what's different about this radio and some of the advantages of this one versus Beta FPV's Light Radio 4 and the T8L from Radio Master. Now, it does have a similar case. It has that straight on side case like the T8L, and a little more bow maybe out to the side for the Light Radio 4 here. But where this one stands apart immediately from the other ones is that the sticks are on the back and they do screw into the case. And when I take these sticks off and I put them on the front, one of the things I want you guys to notice right away is that some people complain about the game style remotes because they have really short sticks, but these have closer to full-size sticks, which allow kind of a more natural feel. It feels like a larger radio. You do get full direction of travel all the way out for all of your FPV maneuvers, which is nice. That's a lot different than the T8L, because the T8L sticks, I will show you right away, they are much shorter, and that's some of the complaints about the T8L. This is a pretty cheap $35. Again, no batteries with this radio, so it's going to eventually cost you $45. Another $10 after you've bought the battery for this one will basically get you more features, a larger internal batteries. Now, to power this one up, I have a power button here. We have a joystick controller, very similar to the other types of radios here on the bench. We also have the lanyard hook right there. And on the bottom, we have our trainer port, the USB-C charging port for the internal battery. We also have this little button down here, and this is, again, like what sets this radio apart. So that puts us into the ELRS menu. I'm going to start this radio up. I want you to notice it does say HD0. It does not say EdgeTX on this radio because this radio doesn't have EdgeTX. And they say that to make it more affordable, they put their own OS on here. So this is HD0 independent OS on this, not EdgeTX. So you know, if you're making this one of your dedicated radios, you have to know that you can't use EdgeTX configurator on this radio. If you do a firmware on it, you're going to have to go to HD0's website, hd-0.com, to get the latest firmware, which, again, you can update right here with that update port. Now, across the top of the radio, we have a latching switch here. There's another latching switch here, 3-position switch, another 3-position switch, a latching switch, and a momentary switch for guys that like to use those. On the back of the radio is where the sticks screw in for storage. And you do have, again, 10 channels on this radio. It is ELRS 2.4 and up to 250 milliwatt. Again, way higher more than twice the amount of power for this radio versus the other two radios on the bench. And the official model name of this radio is actually the HDZ 7000, and that's the name of this radio. So you can see there is a screen in the middle, which is very helpful. If I want to get out of the HD0 independent OS, I click the button on the bottom, and it cuts off momentarily the power to the radio. It won't do that if you're flying the quad. It will not go into that ELRS menu and make your quad drop to the ground. So you could crash if that was allowed, but this radio has a block for that and won't let you crash or go to the express ELRS menu when you press that button. If you're on the ground and it's not armed, the arm switch is out, you can go into the Express LRS menu, which is very nice. You can see all your information here for the version. We can see what hertz we're running, 50 milliwatt, running 1/64 for telemetry and TLM. And we're just going to use the joystick if we want to navigate through those. You can see the LQ, the RSSI. Now I zoomed in a little bit so you can see the HD0 independent OS right here. It does show us all of the main features on the main screen, very similar to Edge DX. You've got your potentiometer movements here for both sticks, throttle and roll and pitch on the right, your RSSI up top, battery level, and your trims all the way around here. And if we use this little joystick down there, if we press to the right, it's kind of like page over or page back. So I can see my channels there, 1 through 10, all of them up on the screen. And we have channel maps here. And once we get to the channel map, if we press up and down on the joystick, it'll let us switch from channel map to calibration, battery levels. We have startup check, and we have the timer. We also have DSC, we have firmware, and we have reset to the factory settings here. You can see these little arrows on the right that tells you to use the joystick to press up and down to go through these features. If you press to the right, it's going to change the menu back to the main menu. And again, what sets this radio apart is the fact that you can do ELRS configuration using this button. So if I press that button once, it'll go dark for a second. And again, that does cut the power to the radio momentarily. You'll lose all of your power out of your radio. It will not let you do that again while you're armed. If the arm switch is armed and engaged, HD0 does have that blocked in the software, so that's cool. We have Express LRS version 3.62 on there. We have at 250 hertz, 1/64 telemetry, TLM. We have it running at 100 milliwatt. We can increase that as well. So if we use the joystick again in here, we can go through, we can see our uplink, RSSI, our antenna info, and our downlink. If we long press, it'll take us into the packet rate, and this is where you can configure all of your ELRS. It will go all the way up to 500 hertz for the packet rate, which will give you a more low latency type of flying experience. If we press down, it'll go through the switch modes. You can change your switches. TX power here, and again, we can go all the way up to 250 milliwatt, which is the most powerful of these game style radios. We have the telemetry ratio here, the BLE gamepad. If you want to use it for Bluetooth to connect to your computer to use your FPV simulator, and we have bind mode also in the menu. So you can long press here, or you can do it right inside the ELRS menu. And all I'm doing to get through all these menus is just pushing up and down. You can also do updates through ELRS Wi-Fi on your computer, ETX admin here, and back to the packet rate. So that's all of the configurations for the ELRS settings in the radio. And if I press this button again, it'll take us back to the independent OS screen. Now here's all the radios bench so you can see them all together, and obviously they all choose different colors here. I know that the T8L does come in some different colors. You can also get this one in white, but the biggest thing is probably the screen difference here. HD0 is running their own OS, which is pretty cool. None of these two have this ELRS configuration button, and even if they did, they don't have a screen. You still have to use your computer. So yeah, that's a difference. The longer sticks on the HD0 controller I like better. It does feel fairly light for having a 4,000 milliamp battery in there, and it does run for up to 10 hours with that 10 milliwatt setting. So if you want it to run a super long time, if you're just flying around the house and things like that, you can run it on 10 milliwatt and have plenty of power. If you're out in the backyard again, you can switch it up to 250 and fly a much bigger quad at a further distance than both of these radios. It's kind of crazy that you have twice the power. Now, so at the end of the day, it's a pretty awesome first release because HD0, they've waited a while. They have been around for many years now. HD0 has been climbing the ladder of quality, and they've also been watching what people are saying on the forums and engaging with the FPV community. So in my opinion, this is more of the all-around FPV pilot's radio. And not just really just for beginners, but for guys who already really know what they're doing. You'll appreciate the functions and the quick access of the OS and the ELRS in this radio. It's just very simple to operate if you're somebody who's already into drones. If you've already been flying FPV, this will be an easy radio and maybe a great backup radio for $55. So I think that's pretty cool, and I'm looking forward to see what they come up with next, because I think they have a great start here, and they kind of have a head start on some of the other companies as far as just listening to everybody and what we want. That's like the most important thing about the community, is finding out what we want and then making a product that, you know, reflects that. That's awesome. So I would give this one definitely 2 thumbs up. And honestly, I think if you're going to consider a gamepad style radio or an FPV simulator radio, that's probably the one over the TAL and the light radio 4. But that's just my opinion, and that's what you're here for. So take it with a grain of salt. You can check out our link down below if you want to support the channel and become a Patreon if you enjoy our honest reviews and feedback of all of the latest and greatest.
Good day guys, still Drone PH. We have here another test and review. So this is the Pabo 20 Pro, the overlight version. So we are installing the BT and the BE122 GPS. So we will try and test if how accurate this GPS with our drone for the shape, just in case we have the RX loss. So watch until the end. We have a little bit tutorial on how I set on the laptop. Okay, so I just soldered the 4 wires, the DXRX, ground, and the 5 volts. Okay, on the AE bird. Then I don't use the 3D print on the GPS. I just put between the canopy and the flywheel case with the overlight. So watch until the end, guys. We will install and we will try to fly outside. Okay, to test the GPS rescue. Let's go. How to install the GPS? Just pretty simple. Just solder the TXRX, ground, and the 5 volt. So I will put in the screen. Just solder the 4 wires. Okay. So after soldering, guys, you can set and go to your laptop on the Betaflight settings. You open your Betaflight settings. Then just select the port, go to port, turn on the UART1 at the sensor input. You just put the GPS, then save and reboot. You can use also the UART6 if you want. Then connect again, then go to configuration. Double check the GPS if on or not. If not on, just put it on. Okay, so you still see the red light on the GPS. So it's not yet connected. Then put the oblocks. Then auto detect. Then save and reboot. Okay, so wait until I think 15 to 20 seconds, I think. You can go outside or you can go near at your window. so that it's fast to detect the satellite, okay? You wait until 7 to 8, the satellite that have been reached. So it's still on red. So you still wait about 7 or 8 satellite. Okay, 7, 5. So 5. Okay, so it's true guys, it's green, it means it's okay now. Okay, so 6, 7, 8, okay. So it's already 6 guys, or 7 satellite.